In the freezing cold of the Showa-era slums, most people are just trying to survive another night. Deep inside a pile of frozen trash, something starts to move. Vlad crawls out of the gutter, bruised and battered but still clutching on a life. His eyes carry a strange blue glow as he stares down his fate. Even in a place like this, he refuses to let his light go out. He's a star that belongs in the sky, not the dirt. A month later, things haven't gotten much easier as Vlad stands outside of Backstreet Smith. He's completely mesmerized by the steel inside, ignoring everything else around him. His friend Gemina snaps him out of it, asking if he's still losing himself in these daydreams. Vlad just wants some peace and quiet, but she's worried about the rumors spreading through the slums. She leans in close, asking if he's still hearing those devil's whispers whenever he picks up a stick. It's been happening ever since he was struck by lightning, and he isn't exactly thrilled about it. Gemina warns him to keep a low profile, especially with the new bishop hunting down anyone with peculiar signs. One wrong move, and he'll end up at the stake. But Vlad's mind is still stuck on the sword he saw. Gemina can't believe he's actually thinking about buying it, and asks how much it even costs. When he tells her it's 5 gold coins, she nearly loses it. To people like them, 5 gold is a fortune, enough to eat and party like kings for an entire year. The old man inside overhears them, and doesn't take kindly to his work being called a piece of iron. He stomps out, telling them that high-quality steel isn't meant for backstreet punks like Gemina isn't one to back down, calling him a senile old man who's lucky anyone even sees his shop. The old man's face turns bright red as his temper flares at her insult. She keeps poking the bear, asking if he's just cranky because he's on his deathbed anyway. He fires back, telling her to get back to her shop and wash dishes like a proper failure. That's the magic word to get Gemina's blood boiling, and Vlad has to step in before things get physical. He literally has to drag her away while the blacksmith continues to scream at their backs. The old man watches them go, muttering about how she's just full of poison. He stomps back toward his forge, still cursing under his breath. But as he looks at his work, his expression softens into something more regretful. He knows that for a kid like Vlad, having big ambitions in a place like this is just asking for a hard life. No matter how much they dream, most people born in the backstreets never make it out. Showa is a massive trade hub under the House of Bezid, but the slums are a world of their own. Vlad heads to his job at a tavern called Rose's Smile, which is as rowdy as ever. A massive mercenary is causing a scene, dragging one of the girls down the stairs by her hair. He's shouting about being scammed, and nobody seems brave enough to stop him. Vlad walks in with a fresh box of candles, looking completely unbothered by the chaos. He tells the guy that if he wants to talk to the madam, he'd better have some gold on it. The mercenary isn't interested in talk. He's furious about the timer candles that burn out way too fast. Vlad just sighs, telling the guy that if he's broke, he should go find some other way to entertain himself. He points to the clock and offers a wager to settle the score right then and there. He holds up a single candle, telling the mercenary he can do whatever he wants if it doesn't last 5 minutes. But his eyes go cold as he adds a condition. If it does last, the guy is getting a beatdown. The mercenary hesitates for a second, but his pride won't let him back down from a brat. The bet is on, and as the clock starts ticking, Vlad prepares to show him why people are whispering. The mercenary stares at the clock, waiting for even a hint of a flicker. But before he can blink, Vlad cracks a wooden stick right across his jaw. With his eyes glowing blue, Vlad coldly reminds him that his 5 minutes are up. He doesn't stop there, launching into a flying kick while the guy is still reeling. The massive mercenary is sent tumbling back, his screams echoing through the tavern. He crashes hard onto the floorboards, completely incapacitated by a kid with a stick. Vlad stands over him for a moment before walking away like it was just another chore. The guy's a complete mess now, nose bleeding as he begs Vlad to wait. Vlad isn't feeling generous, reminding the man that he was the one who started this mess. He delivers one last strike, making it clear that insulting his family was a huge mistake. Upstairs, Jorge is quietly enjoying his meal, acting like the chaos below isn't his problem. Madame Marcella, on the other hand, is making a scene, screaming about anyone daring to mess with her business. Vlad catches up with her, asking how he's supposed to find the culprit when he's kept in the dark. Marcella just gives him a sweet smile and admits that she's the one who scammed the customers. Vlad can only sigh as he walks away, wondering what an employee is supposed to do when the boss is the scammer. His peace doesn't last long before he's cornered by a group of older thugs. They're looking for a cut of his tips, claiming that seniors like them are more entitled to the money. The leader leans in with a smug grin, wanting to strike a deal with his talented junior. To make his point, he pulls up a young boy named Ned by the hair, showing off the kid's fresh black eye. It's a classic slum shakedown, using the child as leverage to get exactly what they want. The thug starts talking about breaking bones, specifically Ned's fingers and ankles, if Vlad doesn't pay up. He acts like he's doing Vlad a favor by only lightly roughing the kid up so far. Vlad doesn't even argue, tossing a heavy bag of coins onto the floor to end the conversation. Ned is shaking and crying, but Vlad's reaction is cold. He tells the thugs to just kill the brat next time. As he walks away, the thugs laugh, but Vlad gets the last word by calling them pathetic moochers. They don't seem to care, noting that Vlad's the only reason the street urchins are even in line. Vlad looks back at the terrified boy, his eyes flashing blue with hidden frustration. Ned tries to apologize through his tears, explaining that he was going to run after taking just a little cash. He can barely get the words out, clearly terrified of what Vlad might do next. Vlad isn't in the mood for excuses and tells the kid to get lost before he gets trampled for real. Ned scrambles away, thanking Vlad for saving him even though it cost him a fortune. Now Vlad is alone again, realizing he's just blown his savings and is further from his dream than ever. Later, he meets with Harbin, a member of the whale hunter family, who's busy with some paperwork. Harbin reminds him of the last time someone got on the bishop's bad side. It was a bloody lesson for everyone. He's already heard about the candle incident at the Rosa Smile and wants to know the story. Vlad isn't surprised the news traveled fast, mentioning that even Jorge is already aware. Harbin explains that organizations only gather funds this quickly when they're preparing for war. And in the slums of Shoera, a conflict between the ruling powers is always a bloody affair. Leading the pack is Jorge, the prostitute's knight, who keeps a tight grip on his territory. Then there's the pig butcher, Black Bear, a man who knows exactly how to carve up his enemies. Captain Hoover, the whale hunter, rules the docks and the waters with an iron fist. Finally, there's One-Armed Jack, the money grubber, who values gold above all else as the shadows of war close in. The tavern falls into an uneasy silence as a massive, intimidating figure carves through the crowd. It's Jack the money grubber, his presence alone enough to make the air grow heavy. He demands to know where the boss is. His eyes burn with a predatory greed that earned him his name, his one good hand never far from his hook. Whispers ripple through the room. Nobody expected one of the 5 bosses to show up personally just for a candle dispute. One of Jack's thugs, a man with a jagged scar over his eye, gets in Vlad's face, barking the question again. But Vlad doesn't even flinch, casually stating that he's just a candle merchant who doesn't keep track of the madam's whereabouts. The thug's face contorts with rage at the boy's dismissive tone, his teeth grinding in frustration. Losing his temper completely, the thug slams his fist onto the table, shattering the wood with a deafening crash. Candles go flying everywhere, but Vlad's focus is elsewhere. His eyes are already glowing that telltale blue. The tavern patrons back away, leaving Vlad and the thug in the middle of a growing circle of debris. Among the spectators, Jemina watches with wide, fearful eyes, praying that Vlad doesn't do something reckless. Vlad looks down at the ruined merchandise, flatly declaring that business for the day is officially over. He kneels to start picking up what's left of his candles, ignoring the massive thug looming over him. Without looking up, Vlad tells the man to move his foot before he loses it, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. The threat only fuels the thug's anger, his face turning a deep shade of red as he prepares to strike. With a roar of rage, the man lunges at the kneeling boy, intending to crush him under his weight. But a fight in these streets is never just a brawl. It's a microcosm of the wars that define the slums. Vlad is already moving, his wooden stick feeling like a true blade in his hand as he prepares to counter. The sound of wood meeting bone is sickeningly sharp as Vlad connects with a precision that defies his age. He strikes the thug across the head with enough force to send the man's head snapping back. It's a bold decision, showing the bosses that he isn't just another street urchin they can trample. Vlad follows up with a second strike, the impact echoing through the silent tavern. Both Jack's crew and the tavern regulars are frozen in shock, unable to believe what they're seeing. The thug collapses in a heap at Vlad's feet, the clear loser of a very short and violent lesson. Another of Jack's men reaches for his axe, but he's stopped before he can escalate the situation any further. Jack himself starts to laugh, clearly impressed by the brat who just took down one of his veterans. He leans in close, telling Vlad that they should have a private meeting later to discuss his future. Jack muses about the strange talents that occasionally sprout up among the outcasts, his red eyes fixed on Vlad. The tension shifts again as Jorge enters the tavern with his own personal guard, his presence radiating authority. He comments that if he'd known he'd have such distinguished guests, he would have had some meat prepared. Jorge and his men stride confidently through the room, stepping past the unconscious man on the floor. Jorge mentions that Marcella has spoken highly of the boy, while Jack admits he has a keen eye for potential. Vlad remains stoic, telling them he's happy enough as long as he's fed, paid, and has a place to sleep. Jack flips a heavy gold coin toward Vlad, a payment for the candles his subordinate ruined. Vlad catches it effortlessly, but Jack's real offer is much larger. Join him, and gold like that will be a daily occurrence. The two bosses and their entourages head toward the back to eat, leaving the aftermath of the fight behind. Jemina finally finds her voice and calls out to Vlad, her relief palpable as she rushes over. The rest of the tavern slowly begins to breathe again, though the atmosphere remains thick with unspoken dread. Later, Jorge pulls Vlad aside and reveals a high-quality dagger, something he planned to reward him with eventually. Vlad looks at the weapon, his blue eyes reflecting the cold steel. He'd sensed the shift in the air long before the fight started. He knows that the civil conversation between Jorge and Jack was actually the beginning of a catastrophe for the slums. They spoke of a new threat Jack is bringing in, a mercenary who, like Jorge, used to be a knight. The presence of a knight-level swordsman is a terrifying variable that could destroy the balance of power in an instant. Jorge acknowledges the danger and tells Vlad that his unique skills are their only hope for survival. Vlad knows he must grow stronger through sheer effort if he ever hopes to reach a higher place. Suddenly, the cold, sharp voice of the devil's whispers cuts through his thoughts once more. The voice isn't just a distraction. It gives him precise instructions on how to adjust his grip and posture. Disturbed by the clarity of the hallucination, Vlad thinks he might need holy water more than a new blade. He shakes his head, determined to ignore the voice before it takes complete control of his mind. He settles into a stance, gathering his strength and focusing his spirit on a single, perfect strike. As he begins his swing, the voice bellows a final command to narrow his strike for maximum impact. The wooden stick whistles through the air, striking the ground with a power that feels almost supernatural. Vlad stares at the result in shock, realizing that the voice's advice has fundamentally changed his technique. A surge of energy erupts around him, a blinding pillar of light that marks the beginning of his true awakening. Deep within his mind, the ethereal image of a grand swordmaster looms, holding a weapon that radiates divine power. Sweat pours down his face as Vlad reels from the revelation, terrified of what might be lurking in the shadows of his soul. A hand wipes fresh blood off the blade with a clean cloth. Godwin stands in the snow, calmly cleaning his sword after the fight. He looks back with a smug grin, sounding pretty satisfied with himself. He scans a letter, muttering about how his senior's request actually makes sense now. Vlad watches him, thinking the guy is a total airhead for being so relaxed. But he stops when he notices a strange intensity in the man's eyes. Vlad tries to create a serious mood, but Godwin doesn't seem to feel the pressure at all. The knight just leans on his sword, casually talking about getting paid fairly. He complains about having to chew on nothing but beef jerky for the last few days. Then, a faint blue hum starts to pulse along the length of the metal. A blue spark ignites right in the middle of his pupil. The sudden surge of energy blows back the air, leaving Vlad completely stunned. Later, Vlad leads him through the dark streets, explaining they have to sneak in through a back door. The town is dead silent as they navigate the shadows of the slums. They finally arrive at the hideout, tucked away from any prying eyes. But the moment they step inside, they find the floor covered in bodies. Vlad stays focused, telling Godwin he'll show him the secret entrance. He then bolts toward the main gate to draw any attention away from them. Vlad bursts into the room, finding the place trashed and covered in blood. Marcella is there, frantically tending to a massive, bandaged man named Jorge. Jorge grunts, admitting he hasn't fought someone of knight status in a long time. Vlad tells them the front gate is under watch, so they need to move now. Jorge just grips his heavy sword, ready to keep fighting. He warns Vlad that Stanga is a fraud who doesn't even know how to use aura. Right then, Godwin steps into the room, his face bloody and his eyes glowing with power. He stands before them, looking a lot more dangerous than he did at the campfire. He tells Jorge he's changed a lot, while the giant asks why he's finally come for him. They lock eyes, and the air between them feels like it's about to catch fire. Jorge doesn't hesitate. He lunges forward with a massive overhead swing. The floor explodes from the impact, sending shards of wood and dust everywhere. But Godwin is already gone, having vanished from the spot Jorge hit. A blur of steel cuts through the air as the two warriors finally collide. Godwin catches the giant blade on his own, holding his ground without breaking a sweat. He looks down at Jorge with a cold, almost bored expression. Jorge pushes with every bit of muscle he has, but the white-haired knight doesn't budge. Godwin just smirks, his eyes flaring with that same blue light from before. With a sudden burst of force, he sends Jorge flying backward through the air. Vlad grabs Marcella, yelling that it's too dangerous to stay there. Jorge is blown straight through a doorway by the sheer power of the strike. Vlad shouts for everyone to gather up and follow him out. He leaps over the wreckage, desperate to lead the survivors to safety. Jorge hits the ground hard, buried under the debris of the collapsing room. Godwin looks down at the defeated giant, telling him he's still making the same foolish decisions he always did. He punctuates his words with another strike, sending a massive shockwave through the ruins of the building. Jorge is left sprawled in the wreckage, barely hanging on as Vlad watches the one-sided massacre in horror. The white-haired knight stands tall amidst the bodies, completely unbothered by the chaos he's caused. He's cold and precise, showing zero mercy to the man who was once his comrade. Seeing his friend in danger, Vlad charges in, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and desperation. The two lock eyes for a split second, the blue of a novice meeting the cold purple of a master. Godwin doesn't even hesitate, swinging his blade with effortless power. Vlad screams out for Jorge to get out of the way, but the warning might be too late. Jorge is coughing up blood, his body finally reaching its limit after the brutal beating. Another heavy impact shatters the floor, making it clear that Godwin isn't just trying to capture him. He leans in, telling Jorge that if he had just followed his orders back then, none of this would be happening. But Jorge isn't backing down, spitting back that he's a human being, not some tool that follows dog's head orders. Godwin just stares at him, reminding him that in their world, he's a knight first and a person second. Marcella and the others can only watch from the shadows, knowing they're completely outmatched by this monster. Godwin starts to turn away, casually mentioning that this long night has finally started to bore him. Vlad is panting, his heart racing as he realizes the massive gap in their strength. Suddenly, a strange vision flashes before his eyes, a blue trajectory cutting through the air. The voices in his head flare up, and for the first time, he sees the sword path, the intent behind the knight's movements. He collapses to his knees in the dust, trying to make sense of the overwhelming information flooding his mind. But he doesn't stay down for long, his gaze sharpening as he finds his resolve. His fingers tighten around the hilt of his sword, his knuckles turning white from the pressure. With a primal roar, Vlad's eyes ignite with a brilliant blue light that pierces through the darkness. He lunges forward, throwing everything he has into a single, desperate strike. The blade cuts through the air, moving with a speed and precision that catches even Godwin off guard. The knight barely parries the blow, his eyes widening as he realizes what he's looking at. He can't believe it. A rookie from a slum ditch actually possesses the legendary way of the sword. He quickly recovers and delivers a counterstrike that sends Vlad tumbling across the wooden floor. Godwin pauses, looking at the boy with a newfound spark of genuine interest. Vlad hits the ground hard, groaning in pain as he tries to catch his breath. Godwin realizes that even though the boy is weak, his sword is sharper and more dangerous than any regular soldier's. Vlad looks up, his vision blurry as he tries to process the knight's overwhelming presence. The knight stands there for a moment, weighing whether or not to end the sprout, right then and there. Despite the blood and the bruises, Vlad glares back, vowing through gritted teeth that he's going to kill him. Godwin just turns his back and starts walking away, his boots clicking rhythmically on the floorboards. Vlad screams his name, finally realizing that Stanga was just a cover for the elite knight, Godwin. The knight doesn't stop, telling the boy he'll be waiting to see if he can actually keep that promise. He disappears into the shadows, leaving behind a wake of destruction and a broken hideout. Outside, a discarded sword lies in the blood-stained snow, a silent witness to the knight's tragedy. Zemina rushes to Vlad's side, throwing his arm over her shoulder to help him flee the area. Vlad clutches his side, his face contorted in pain as they limp away through the cold streets. He eventually collapses to one knee, coughing violently while his friend looks on in desperate worry. A woman from Vlad's past, Oksana Bezid, looms over him in a vision, barking at him to get up if he doesn't want to die. She slaps some sense into the dazed boy, her face a mask of cold authority. She commands him to pull himself together, reminding him that the slums are no place for the weak. Oksana asks him if he knows the real difference between the rats in the gutter and the nobles across the street. With a piercing gaze, she tells him it all comes down to one thing: opportunities. She grabs him roughly by the clothes, drilling the lesson into his head with a terrifying intensity. Back in the present, Zemina hovers over a gasping Vlad, asking if he's okay and if they should slow down. Vlad grits his teeth, his vision clearing as he mutters that things can't just end in this frozen alleyway. Their moment is cut short by the shouts of pursuers echoing nearby. The hunt for Jorge's kid is still very much on. The two of them scramble to their feet and take off, their boots crunching desperately through the fresh snow. Behind them, a pack of armed thugs rounds the corner, their blades glinting in the moonlight. The killers are relentless, sprinting through the narrow gaps between the ramshackle buildings. The thugs pause at a crossroads, frustrated as they realize they've lost sight of their prey. Their leader gnaws on his lip in rage, cursing the rats for being so slippery. Just a few feet away, Vlad and Zemina are pressed against a wooden door, Vlad clutching a dagger as he listens for footsteps. Vlad looks at Zemina, his voice a low whisper as he promises he'll find a way out for her. He explains that since the enemies are traveling in packs, trying to move together will only lead them into a trap. Zemina's eyes well up with tears as she refuses to leave his side, begging him to stay together. Vlad tries to give her a destination, suggesting she head for Harbin's, but she just keeps shouting no. Finally snapping, Vlad calls her a moron and asks if he looks like he's in any condition to protect anyone. Zemina flinches at his harsh words, her lip trembling as she tries to find a counter-argument. The scene shifts to a nearby forge, where Zemina has found a small knife and is holding it with shaking hands. She points the blade at the old man, blacksmith, who lives there, while he asks what she thinks she's doing. Terrified but determined, she screams at the old man not to move or she'll actually stab. The blacksmith doesn't look even remotely intimidated by the girl's amateurish stance. Vlad stands in the doorway, his eyes glowing with that strange blue light as he watches the confrontation. The old man sighs, telling her he understands her desperation, but demands she put that unsightly thing down. Zemina doesn't listen, screaming at the top of her lungs for him to hand over a real sword. The blacksmith is taken aback by the sheer audacity of the demand coming from such a young girl. Vlad calls out to her to stop, but Zemina is beyond reasoning, demanding a weapon right this second. The old man looks at them both, thinking about how it's just the nature of slum kids to steal whatever they need to survive. But as he looks closer at Zemina, he sees a level of raw, tearful resolve that isn't about simple theft. With a sudden, wild movement, Zemina grabs a tool from the workbench and raises it high. Vlad reaches out, shouting her name as he tries to prevent her from doing something she'll regret. Instead of attacking the blacksmith, Zemina grabs her own long, red hair and pulls it tight. The old man's eyes widen in shock as he realizes what the girl is about to sacrifice. With a sharp slice, she hacks off her beautiful hair, throwing it down as a pledge of her sincerity. The blacksmith is left speechless, the girl's desperate, "I swear," ringing through the quiet forge. Vlad can only stand there and watch, stunned by the lengths his friend is willing to go to for their survival. Moved by her act, the old man turns and tells them to follow him into the deeper parts of the forge. Suddenly, a voice from the street yells out for the old man, and the blacksmith freezes. He looks toward the entrance as the group of armed pursuers arrives, their eyes scanning for any sign of the runaways. Outside the forge, one of the thugs spots the blacksmith and asks if he's really out dumping trash in the middle of a snowstorm. The old man, blacksmith, doesn't take kindly to the intrusion, shouting that his shop is already packed with junk he'd love to throw out. The thug with the scar just stares, thinking the old guy has one hell of short fuse. Hiding in plain sight among the rubbish on a cart, a cloaked figure stays perfectly still while the snow falls. The thug decides to play it cool, saying he'll respect the old man's space, but he still needs to confirm no one's hiding there. He reaches for his sword, the metal glinting ominously as the tension in the air thickens. With a sudden movement, the thug draws his blade, ready to slice through any hiding spot he finds. A close-up reveals Zemina huddled in the dark, looking absolutely exhausted as she laments how hard it is just to get a meal. Finding nothing but actual junk, the thug sheathes his sword and tells his men they're clear to leave. Once the coast is clear, Vlad steps out with his sword over his shoulder, asking if they're finally safe to go. The blacksmith and the short-haired Zemina share a silent, weary look as the adrenaline starts to fade. The old man grumbles about his decision to help them, but he admits that in this neighborhood, there's really nowhere else for them to go. Vlad looks at Zemina, who's shivering and clearly traumatized by the night's brutal events. The old man gets back to his forge, the rhythm of his work providing a small sense of normalcy in the chaos. Zemina finally lets it out, sobbing into her hands as the reality of her sacrifice sinks in. Vlad's mind drifts to a kid from the slums who once paid him back some silver his brother owed, a rare moment of honesty in a cruel world. He remembers Zemina as she used to be, before tonight changed everything, her voice full of concern for his health. The scene shifts to a mental landscape where a version of Vlad stands with a blade, his eyes glowing with an intense, supernatural light. Deep in this vision, he holds a sword of pure radiance, asking the empty air who is speaking to him. The voice, the whisperer, claims it doesn't even know its own identity, leaving Vlad with more questions than answers. Vlad acknowledges that despite not knowing who the voice is, it has taught him more about swordsmanship than anyone else ever could. He tightens his grip on the hilt, the power of the blade vibrating through his entire body. He looks straight ahead, declaring that he's past the point of caring if this power comes from a demon or a god. As the blue light in his eyes flares, Vlad makes his choice. He will become whatever he needs to be to survive. Joseph Bezid, the second son of the house, sits over a map of the region, plotting his next move. Things are going too smoothly, and in his world, that usually means trouble is brewing just out of sight. His lead knight, Jair, enters the room to report on the latest developments from the field. The scarred veteran stands tall, fresh back from his duties. Noticing his master's grim expression, he asks if something specific is weighing on him. Joseph is focused on the reports, the lack of results, and the increasing number of soldiers abandoning their posts. He sighs, leaning back. The mix of mediocre performance and desertion is a recipe for disaster. The shadow of his half-brother, Tiger, looms large over the coming succession battle. At this rate, Joseph knows only destruction awaits their house. House Bayezid has always been defined by its military might, a legacy Joseph is desperate to maintain. But he feels like he's running out of usable talent. Aside from Jair, he has no one he can truly rely on. Jair speaks up, mentioning he has a report about a certain suspicious mercenary. The knight explains that the recruit's growth is almost too fast to be believed. They head out to inspect some goblin corpses. To Jair, the sword work in the first batch looks like it was done by a child. Joseph covers his nose, disgusted by the stench and the general lack of skill shown by his men. He moves to the next pile, noting that these cuts are slightly more precise. Then he pauses. Despite the different corpse, the trajectory of the strike is exactly the same. Jair confirms his suspicion. That particular kill was recorded only yesterday. Joseph is stunned. Nobody goes from amateur to that level of precision in just a single month. He demands to know the name of the man behind these strikes. The scene shifts back to the front lines, where the blood and chaos are still very real. Mercenaries clash with goblins in the snow, the air thick with the sounds of battle. The squad leaders bark orders, trying to close the circle and wipe out the stragglers. One spearman lets his guard down, assuming the battle is as good as over. The celebratory mood vanishes as the soldiers notice a massive shadow stretching across the snow. A towering hobgoblin stands right behind them, its eyes glowing a feral red. With one swift motion, the brute brings its club down on the unsuspecting mercenary. A massive explosion of snow and force sends the nearby soldiers flying. The hobgoblin stands firm, its gaze fixed on the terrified men in front of it. The mercenaries scramble to get away, realization dawning that they can't handle a monster like this. The brute lunges into the group, its massive club scattering them like leaves. Cries of panic fill the air as the defensive line completely collapses. Roderick, the commander, bellows at them to hold their ground and stop acting like cowards. The mercenaries shout back in frustration, telling him he should have hired professionals or handled it himself. Roderick's horse rears up in fright as the hobgoblin continues its rampage. The monster roars, its presence looming over the broken formation. Roderick can only watch nervously as his control over the field slips away. Amidst the chaos, a lone figure grips his sword with practiced calm. The fleeing soldiers stop in their tracks as they see someone walking straight toward the threat. It's Vlad, maintaining his humble mask as Reman of prayers, even in the face of death. He launches into a high-speed lunge, aiming a single, lethal strike at the monster. The hobgoblin barely has time to react as the blade closes in. Vlad locks onto his target. His gaze is sharp as the edge of his blade. He moves in a flash, cutting deep into the hobgoblin's side. But as the beast roars in pain, he realizes the strike wasn't deep enough to end. He dances back, resetting his stance while the monster's blood stains the snow. The brute lunges, but Vlad is already moving, kicking up a cloud of powder as he evades. He stays low to the ground, coiled and waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. The hobgoblin is driven by pure instinct, but Vlad is calculating every move. The massive club comes crashing down with enough force to shatter bone. Vlad slips past the attack, his focus never leaving the monster's vulnerable points. The air whistles as the massive weapon misses him by a hair's breadth. The beast is overextended, its massive muscles tensing as it prepares for another swing. It's a wall of raw fury, but Vlad knows that fury alone won't win this fight. Far from the front lines, Lord Joseph Bayezid studies the reports on this mysterious new recruit. He doesn't believe in miracles and orders Jair to dig into Reman's past immediately. He finds a man's technique to be crude and unrefined, yet undeniably effective. Vlad isn't interested in pretty form. He only cares about getting results. As the mercenaries clear the field, the scale of the slaughter becomes clear to everyone. God catches up to him, eager to ride the coattails of the camp's rising star. The mercenary offers to hook Vlad up with some counterfeit documents to smooth over his history. The Whisperer intervenes, warning Vlad that loose lips are the quickest way to the gallows. The cold intensity in Vlad's eyes is enough to make the man instantly regret speaking. God quickly backs off, realizing he overstepped his bounds with the wrong person. To keep up his facade, Vlad retreats to the woods to play the part of the prayerful soldier. The voices in his head find the whole act pathetic, mocking his display of fake piety. The vast mercenary camp sits nestled under the shadow of the northern peaks. The men are in high spirits, enjoying hot meals provided by their noble employer. Vlad walks through the camp with his head down, maintaining his distant holy aura. He leaves the noise behind, seeking out the one man who can bolster his cover. He finds Priest Andreas and greets him with a perfectly practiced and humble bow. The old priest is completely taken in, convinced he's looking at a rare and faithful soul. He's so impressed that he invites the young mercenary to share his breakfast. Vlad plays along, closing his eyes in a show of deep devotion before he even touches his food. Andreas watches him with a fatherly smile, clearly pleased with his star disciple. To him, Vlad is a shining example of faith in a camp full of rough-edged killers. He urges him to enjoy the fresh bread, a luxury in this frozen mountain pass. But then he drops a bombshell. Word of Vlad's talent has already reached Lord Joseph. He speaks of the Bezid household with reverence, unaware of the danger his words represent. Vlad listens quietly, hiding the growing tension beneath his calm exterior. Later, he realizes his attempt to blend in has backfired in the worst possible way. Priest Andreas is a powerful ally, but his high-profile support is drawing way too many eyes. The Whisperer finds the irony hilarious, calling Vlad a heinous criminal hiding in plain sight. It suggests he should take his chance and run before the noble's investigators uncover the truth. Vlad's senses tingle as he feels a dangerous presence closing in from the shadows behind him. He spins around in a defensive crouch, his blade becoming a silver blur in the dim winter light. Watching from the tree-line, Jair is impressed by the boy's instincts, noting that he's far more capable than he first thought. Vlad curses his own hesitation, realizing that his window to escape into the wilderness has already slammed shut. Jair steps out into the clearing, asking the boy if he truly sensed his approach or if it was just luck. Without another word, the one-eyed knight commands Vlad to follow him deeper into the mercenary camp. Vlad contemplates a desperate dash for freedom, but the cold voice in his head warns him that escape from this man is impossible. Resigned to his fate, he sheathes his weapon, knowing that any resistance at this point would be suicide. In the heart of the camp, they enter the commander's tent, where Lord Joseph Bezid waits with a chillingly calm expression. Joseph studies Vlad's features, noting that his striking blonde hair and blue eyes give him the look of a fallen noble. Suddenly, the Lord's demeanor shifts, and he seizes Vlad with a grip like iron. His patience evaporated. His gaze turns murderous as he declares his absolute hatred for those who hide behind a web of lies. The air in the tent turns ice cold as Joseph speaks Vlad's true name, stripping away his persona in an instant. Vlad's blood runs cold. His carefully constructed cover has been completely dismantled before he could even defend. Before he can process the shock, a swift and precise blow from Jair sweeps his legs out from under him. Vlad hits the hard ground with a heavy thud, the wind completely knocked out of his lungs. Jair stands over him, a grim reminder that in this camp, he is nothing more than a child playing at being a soldier. Joseph looms over the boy, guessing that a mercenary group must have picked up the trash from some battlefield and brought him here. Despite the humiliation, the light in Vlad's eyes doesn't fade. Instead, it burns with a new, icy intensity. He recalls the core principles of his training, focusing his entire being on the concept of striking with the speed of light. He admits that while he hid his name, he has something of far greater value to offer the Lord of Bayezid. He speaks of a vision, a singular, peerless mastery of the blade that most men could only dream of witnessing. Joseph's tone softens as he offers a mock apology for the rough handling, his interest clearly piqued by the boy's resolve. He leans in close, asking Vlad if he possesses the ambition to rise far above his current status as a common mercenary. Vlad remains in a submissive posture, but the power dynamic in the room has already begun to subtly shift. To test the boy's claims, Joseph orders Jair to begin a rigorous training regimen, starting with a wooden sword duel. As the two clash, Joseph watches with a hungry look in his eyes, eager to see the mastery Vlad spoke of in action. The sparring session is brutal. Vlad grunts in pain as Jair's wooden blade finds every opening in his defense. Jair mocks his lack of discipline, reminding him that raw talent is useless without proper refinement and experience. Vlad realizes the terrifying gap between them. No matter where he moves, Jair is already there to meet him. Pushed to his absolute limit, Vlad's pupils dilate as he prepares to throw everything into a single, desperate gambit. He ignores the pain and the fatigue, focusing his entire world on the arc of his practice sword. He leaps forward, bringing his weapon down in a powerful overhead strike fueled by pure, raw desperation. For a fleeting moment, a faint spark of blue energy dances along the length of his practice blade. The wooden swords collide with a sharp crack that echoes through the quiet training ground. Jair parries the blow with practiced ease, but the sheer force of the impact leaves Vlad gasping for air and nearly spent. Jair informs the boy that they will be sparring twice a day from now on, much to Vlad's exhausted surprise. The knight walks away without a second glance, leaving Vlad alone to reflect on the grueling lessons he's just received. He realizes that Jair wasn't just beating him. He was systematically stripping away every bad habit Vlad had developed. Later that evening, Jair reports his findings to Lord Joseph, admitting that the boy's potential is surprisingly high. Joseph smiles, a dark and calculating expression that suggests he's finally found exactly the tool he was looking for. He looks over his maps and plans, confident that Vlad is the final piece he needs to achieve his ambitious goals. Jair cautions that a sword without inherent loyalty is a dangerous tool that can never be fully trusted. Joseph retorts that a polite bow means nothing. He'd much rather deal with an honest wolf whose fangs are visible. He considers it a stroke of luck that Vlad revealed his sharp, dangerous nature right from the very beginning. To Joseph, a relationship built on mutual gain and clear desires is far more reliable than blind scent. Jair bows his head slightly, acknowledging his lord's cold but undeniably pragmatic logic. Deep down, Jair continues to view the young mercenary as a wild animal that must be carefully managed. Joseph wears a satisfied smirk, confident in his ability to break and use this new weapon for his own ends. Outside in the winter night, the young soldier got shivers as the freezing fog settles over the camp. He feels a pang of envy, wishing he had the talent to become Jair's disciple as quickly as Vlad did. As he moves away from the warmth of the fire, the silence of the forest starts to feel heavy and suffocating. His commander, Roderick, appears from the shadows, his presence as stern and imposing as ever. Roderick curtly orders the soldier to focus on his patrol and not let the biting cold distract him from his duty. Got watches as Roderick's silver-armored figure is slowly swallowed up by the thick, swirling mist. He thinks to himself that Roderick is a man of iron, so sturdy that not even a single needle could pierce his armor. He knows that once the commander sets out on a patrol, he won't be returning to the warmth of the tents for quite some time. Suddenly, Got catches sight of a figure standing motionless in the snow and calls out a sharp challenge. A haunting, thin voice answers from the darkness, claiming to be searching for a lost child. The soldier is frozen in place, his instincts screaming that something about this encounter is fundamentally wrong. Driven by a mixture of duty and mounting dread, he begins to follow the faint crunch of footprints in the snow. He wonders where anyone could be going in such a desolate and dangerous area at this hour of the night. Got calls out again, but the silence that follows is broken only by the sound of his own ragged, terrified breathing. He finally catches sight of the figure's back, but the armor it wears is being consumed by a swirling, ink-black aura. Got's eyes widen in sheer terror as he realizes the magnitude of the nightmare he has just stumbled into. Before he can even draw a breath to scream, a violent eruption of dark energy tears through the fabric of the night. Vlad is told this is a once-in-a-lifetime chance, something people would pay good money for just to see a knight like Jair in person. Got leans in close, whispering to the newbie that the situation isn't as glamorous as it sounds. He flags Vlad down from behind a tree, desperate to get a word in before they go any further. The guy complains that while the pay is all right, this frozen wasteland isn't exactly a great work environment. Vlad keeps walking, but the mercenary won't stop pestering him with his gossip. He brings up Sir Roderick, likely the person Vlad is supposed to be replacing on this mission. The guy looks like he's about to have a heart attack, sweating through the winter chill. Jair leads the way on horseback, explaining that since 3 knights were posted here, nothing bad should have happened. Vlad realizes it's just another scam, preying on people's sense of duty to lead them into a mess. The group reaches the edge of a massive forest clearing near a frozen river. Jair stops to check the ice, noting that since winter is ending, crossing it might be a bit risky. The whole team stands at the bank, staring out at the wide, icy expanse they have to cross. God doesn't hold back his fear, shouting that he's terrified of the whole thing breaking under them. Vlad stares down at the surface, sensing that something is seriously wrong with the river. He watches as the mercenary tests the ice with a spear, his nerves completely shot. Halfway across, the guy finally loses it, dropping to his knees and refusing to go any further. Vlad tries to haul him up, but the man is dead weight, paralyzed by terror. Suddenly, God sees it, a pale, lifeless face staring back at him from right under the ice. The rest of the team looks down, realizing the water beneath them is packed with bodies. It's a massive underwater graveyard, and the ice is glowing with an eerie blue light. A loud crack echoes through the air as the pressure becomes too much for the frozen surface. Panic erupts as the ice starts to splinter, and the knights bark orders to cross as fast as possible. A hand smashes through the frozen sheet, reaching for anything it can grab. One by one, the dead start clawing their way out of the river, their jaws unhinged in silent screams. The subjugation team is caught right in the middle, surrounded on all sides on the cracking ice. These aren't just mindless bodies. Their eyes glow with a cursed blue light as they lunge for the living. Rising from the mist, a ghostly woman appears, her voice echoing with a haunting plea for her missing child. One of the ghouls screams, charging toward the group with its claws out. Guy completely loses it, screaming for the captain to save them as the monsters close in. The monster bears down on him, its face a bloodied mask of rage and decay. Vlad draws his sword and steps in, slicing through the first creature to reach them. More of the dead swarm the eyes, their numbers seemingly endless as they crawl out of the depths. Vlad's right eye starts to glow with a strange light as he centers himself for the fight. He cuts a path through the mob, his movements precise and lethal. He yells at the cowering mercenary to pick up a weapon, but the guy is paralyzed by fear. Looking around, Vlad realizes they're being boxed in by a literal army of the dead. Jair joins the fray, his heavy blade smashing through anything that gets close. The knight braces himself, readying a massive strike to clear the area. A vibrant green aura flares around him as he prepares to unleash his full power. The corpses ignore the display of power, driven only by the darkness of the curse. They scream in unison, a sound that chills the mercenaries to the bone. Jair unleashes his aura in a massive burst, scattering the undead army like leaves in a storm. Jair is a whirlwind of green aura, tearing through the undead that swarm the frozen river. Vlad checks on the knight, realizing that despite his power, the situation is spiraling out of control. Despite the chaos, Jair remains focused, his eye patch-covered gaze fixed on the endless waves of enemies. Vlad doesn't stay idle. He charges back into the fray, his mind set on finding the legendary knight goaded. Jair's blade glows with intense green light as he prepares to cut down another group of ghouls. Vlad finally regroups with him, offering a quick apology for the delay as they face the horde together. Elsewhere, Lord Joseph Bezid is trying to focus on his work, his study lit only by the flickering glow of a lamp. The peace is shattered when Vorden bursts into the room, frantic and completely out of breath. Joseph looks up, clearly annoyed by the sudden interruption and the news of the commotion outside. He questions why the mercenary ran straight to him instead of handling the situation first. Realizing the gravity of the problem, Joseph leads his personal retinue out to investigate for himself. His sharp eyes scan the surroundings, sensing an unnatural chill settling over the estate. He orders the group to pick up the pace, knowing they can't afford to waste a single second. The air becomes thick with a foul, supernatural stench that forces Joseph to cover his face in disgust. A chilling voice echoes through the darkness, calling out for a lost child in a haunting wail. Fear washes over the group as the oppressive atmosphere of the curse takes hold. The cursed ghost woman manifests before them, her hollow eyes filled with an unsettling madness. She fixates on them, her voice a grating screech as she repeats her tragic, haunting plea. She is a nightmare made flesh, a vengeful spirit driven by a single, desperate goal. Priest Andreas begins a fervent prayer, trying to manifest a barrier against the encroaching darkness. The holy hymn creates a circle of light, offering a fragile sanctuary for Joseph and his men. The weaker guards have already collapsed, unable to withstand the ghost's crushing presence. A spectral hand reaches into the light, testing the strength of the priest's holy protection. Andreas urges the young deacon, Jang, to hold firm, promising that the sun will eventually rise. The ghost's hand sizzles as it touches the holy barrier, but the entity refuses to back down. The strain is too much for Jang, who starts coughing up blood as his spiritual energy fades. Sensing the barrier is about to fail, the ghost woman looms over the group, ready to strike. Joseph realizes they are seconds away from their defenses shattering and their lives end. Just as the ghost is about to pounce, a figure leaps through the mist from a distance. It's Vlad, but he's transformed. His eyes glow with a terrifying, crackling blue light. He descends like a bolt from the heavens, a pillar of energy trailing behind his blade. This isn't just normal aura. It's a violent, blue lightning that seems to be consuming his very soul. He targets the ghost woman directly, ignoring the immense risk to his own physical body. The spirit screams in defiance, her face twisting into a horrific, gnarled snarl. Vlad channels every ounce of the voice's power into one final, desperate strike. He connects with a massive explosion of blue energy, tearing straight through the ghost's spectral form. The spectators can only watch in absolute silence as the impossible feat unfolds before them. The sheer power of the strike backfires, sending waves of intense agony through Vlad's body. Joseph yells out in shock as he sees the boy who just saved them begin to collapse from the strain. Vlad falls to the ground, his body trembling as the blue lightning finally begins to dissipate. The ghost is gone, but the price of victory is heavy. Vlad lies motionless on the frozen ground. Joseph rushes to his side, ordering the priest to maintain him while they check on the boy. Lord Joseph Bezid is caught in the spectral backlash, his hands trembling as dark energy swirls around him. He cries out in agony as the malevolent force of the curse tears at his very being. Joseph grits his teeth, cursing his own physical weakness as he struggles to maintain his composure against the onslaught. Amidst the chaos, a desperate grip is all that keeps the young noble grounded as the battle reaches its peak. Possessed by the mysterious blue lightning, Vlad faces off against the spectral woman, their energies clashing in a violent display. The ghost woman looms over them, her face a mask of eternal suffering as tears of blood stream from her hollow eyes. With a surge of unnatural power, Vlad unleashes a final strike that sends a shockwave rippling through the clearing. In the depths of his fading consciousness, a memory of Priest Andreas surfaces, a plea for a blessing upon his blade. The young Vlad of Sora had always carried a heavy burden, his eyes reflecting a determination beyond his years. In his vision, the spirit of the mother kneels before him, her voice a desperate whisper begging for him to find her child. Vlad stares into the abyss of her sorrow, his own blue eyes reflecting the weight of her tragic request. She lets out one last, agonizing scream, the sound of a soul finally reaching its breaking point. Vlad brings his sword down with finality, his voice a calm murmur. May you rest in peace. The blue energy surges, completely enveloping the spectral form and dispelling the dark clouds of the curse. As she begins to vanish, the ghost woman's expression finally softens into one of weary peace. Far from the conflict, a mysterious hooded figure observes the result, dark magic still crackling between their fingers. They are the true source of the nightmare, manipulating the dead from the safety of the shadows. Sitting alone in the frozen wilderness, the necromancer watches as their plan is thwarted by the unexpected power of the boy. 3 days later, Joseph reflects on the harrowing encounter, certain that someone was pulling the strings from the shadows. Vlad finally stirs from his deep slumber, the familiar, cryptic voices of the whisperer echoing in his mind. As he sits up, the voices mockingly point out how much Lord Joseph seems to have grown concerned for his well-being. Stepping out into the crisp morning air, Vlad finds the estate bustling with activity as they prepare to depart. A mercenary spots him and runs over, his face lighting up with relief as he shouts for his captain. The man is clearly overjoyed to see Vlad awake, having feared the worst during his long coma. Vlad waves off the man's excessive worry, trying to shake off the lingering exhaustion from the battle. Later, Vlad sits down with Joseph and Jair, the young noble noting that Vlad had every opportunity to flee. Joseph watches Vlad closely, realizing that he cannot afford to lose someone with such unique and formidable talent. Jair enters to report that the remaining mercenaries have been compensated and sent on their way. Seeing Vlad's restlessness, Joseph grants him permission to take the rest of the day to explore the city. Vlad watches the noble walk away, finding the man's stern but fair attitude somewhat baffling. The whisperer continues to chime in, noting that even the stoic Jair seems to have taken a liking to him. His musings are interrupted by a gentle tug on his sleeve from the young deacon. The boy smiles kindly at him, offering his assistance in navigating the sprawling estate grounds. They arrive at the local cathedral, a structure so grand it makes the chapel in Vlad's hometown seem tiny in comparison. The deacon invites him inside, promising that Priest Andreas will be joining them shortly. Vlad steps into the sanctuary, the sunlight streaming through the windows and illuminating the path forward. Priest Andreas soon appears, offering a warm smile and an apology for keeping Vlad waiting. He hands Vlad a small wooden tablet, a gesture that carries more weight than any gold or treasure. It is a formal document naming the priest as Vlad's official guarantor, a status he never thought possible. For a boy who grew up in the alleys without even a birth registration, this recognition is life-changing. Vlad kneels before the priest, overwhelmed by the kindness of the man he now considers a father figure. Soon after, the group sets off again, the carriage rolling through the vast and prosperous lands of the Bayezid County. Looking out from the carriage, Vlad of Sora takes in the sight of the Bayezid estate, a world far removed from the back alleys he once knew. Jair, the mercenary captain, delivers a stern warning to Vlad and Gott, telling them to maintain their dignity and stay put once inside. The two young men are led into a lavishly decorated waiting room, the opulence of the chandelier and furniture leaving them both slightly overwhelmed. Their quiet wait is interrupted by a mysterious figure slipping through the curtains, muttering about his failed attempt to sneak away for some fun. Vlad's keen blue eyes narrow as he observes the newcomer, sensing an air of casual confidence that doesn't quite match a common servant. The man, Ratiger Bezid, steps into the light with a playful smirk, questioning who the two unfamiliar faces are. He studies them for a moment, his gaze lingering on Vlad with a hint of curiosity behind his relaxed demeanor. To their surprise, Ratiger casually extends a handful of peanuts, offering them as if they were old friends rather than strangers in a noble house. God is nearly paralyzed with shock his mind racing as he realizes they are being addressed by a high-ranking noble with such eccentric behavior. While Got remains frozen, Vlad takes the offer, much to the amusement of the young noble who seems genuinely pleased by the snack. Meanwhile, in a formal study, Lord Joseph Bezid stands respectfully before his father, the formidable Count Bezid. The Count looks over documents, expressing his interest in Vlad's potential and promising a reward if Joseph can mold him into a proper knight. Count Bezid turns his attention to his son's health, asking with a rare moment of gentleness if he is feeling any better after the recent ordeal. Joseph bows his head in respect, confirming his recovery, though his steps are still heavy with the burden of his fragile constitution. As Joseph departs, the Count and his advisor discuss the need for specialized medicine to aid his recovery, knowing his mother, Oksana, will be concerned. Memories of the dark curse and the spectral hands still linger in the back of their minds, a reminder of the dangerous forces they recently faced. Count Bezid's expression turns grim as he speaks of the future, hoping that they can find the answers they seek before more lives are lost. Later that evening, Joseph and Jair enter the waiting room, Joseph apologizing for the long delay in their meeting. Joseph turns to address Vlad's companion, correctly identifying him as God, who responds with a stiff, military-style salute. They gather in the dimly lit lounge, the atmosphere shifting from casual waiting to a more serious discussion about their future. Joseph acknowledges Vlad's desire for freedom, a sentiment that the young man echoes with a quiet but firm confirmation. The conversation takes a sharp turn as Joseph's gaze fixes on Vlad, his expression becoming intensely serious. Vlad's mysterious blue eye begins to pulse with a faint light as he senses the weight of the question that is about to be asked. The room seems to chill as Joseph mentions a name that carries a dark reputation, Godin of Gaidar. Do you know of him? Joseph admitted he'd underestimated the kid, thinking he was just some talented brat from the streets. But the memory of the monster that killed Vlad's savior changed everything for him. Vlad didn't say much, just sat there and let the noble finish his thought. The room went quiet as Joseph carefully considered his next move. Jair stood by the wall, watching Vlad closely and figuring the boy was telling the truth. Finally, Joseph stood up and agreed to help with any trouble coming from the Shoara alleys. He mentioned a girl named Gemina, who was currently staying at a nearby monastery. Then he warned Vlad that in this world, people's words are just as sharp as their swords. As he walked away, Joseph wondered why the boy looked so desperate. Vlad just stared into space, his mind stuck on the things he'd seen back home. He still couldn't shake the image of that final, bloody battle in the snow. Later, Jair led him to a private room that looked way too fancy for someone like him. Vlad joked that it felt like he was living in a literal palace now. Jair just grunted, reminding him that he'd still taken a beating earlier despite the surroundings. Their conversation was cut short when Lady Oksana, Joseph's mother, walked into the hall. Jair immediately bowed to show his respect, and Vlad quickly followed his lead. They stood perfectly still as the noblewoman looked them over with interest. She asked if this was really the boy who had saved her son's life. Vlad kept his head down, feeling completely out of place in such a grand hallway. Oksana stepped in close and tilted his head up to get a better look at his face. The boy turned bright red, barely managing to stutter out a thank you to the lady. She told Jair to keep up the good work and then headed out with her attendants. Once they were alone, Jair told Vlad to head to the cafeteria and get some food. As soon as he sat down to eat, Vlad felt every eye in the room drill into him. A group of noble trainees stood nearby, laughing and making sure the alley rat felt unwelcome. Vlad just finished his meal and got up to leave without acknowledging any of it. But for a split second, his eye flashed with a cold, blue light. Up on the balcony, Count Bezid watched the trainees prepare for their sparring session. He leaned on the railing, observing the new recruits with a sharp, experienced eye. He asked his subordinate if the kid standing in the center was the one Joseph had mentioned. The training grounds were soon filled with the sharp sound of wood clashing on wood. Vlad stepped into the fray, meeting his first opponent's sword with a solid, heavy block. He moved through the crowd with total ease, dropping several trainees in quick succession. One of the older boys gritted his teeth, realizing this kid was actually dangerous. Vlad's eyes glowed with intensity as he focused on his next target. He traded a flurry of blows with the trainee, never losing his balance for a second. It wasn't even close to a fair fight. Vlad was operating on a completely different level. The boy swung his sword with a desperate shout, trying to land just one lucky hit. But Vlad easily dodged the wide swing, disappearing from the boy's line of sight. He reappeared right behind him, staring him down for a split second before finishing it. A single, fast strike sent the trainee stumbling forward, completely off balance. Before the guy could even blink, Vlad grabbed him by the hair and slammed him down. Vlad kept his grip firm, staring down at the trainee he'd just completely dismantled. The boy was a total mess, his face smeared with blood and his teeth bared in a mix of pain and rage. The rest of the trainees could only stand by and watch, completely paralyzed by the violence they'd just witnessed. Up on the balcony, the older knights observed the scene, realizing things were getting a bit too heated. Count Bezid didn't seem too bothered, noting that Vlad actually looked satisfied with the outcome of the spar. Finally, an instructor stepped in and shouted for everyone to stop immediately before someone got seriously hurt. Vlad froze instantly, his fist just inches away from delivering another crushing blow. He held the position for a heartbeat, showing just how much control he really had over his own aggression. Slowly, he let go of the trainee's hair and let the boy slump back onto the cold ground. He stood tall, looking down at his defeated opponent with a gaze that said more than any words ever could. Without a single look at the crowd, Vlad turned around and started walking away from the training circle. He told the kid to send his regards to his boss, casually mentioning that he tends to lose his cool when he gets too absorbed in a fight. One of the noble trainees glared at his back, his face twisted in pure, unadulterated hatred. But Vlad just gave a chilling, predatory smile over his shoulder, his eye glowing with a terrifying blue light. He was making it crystal clear that he wasn't someone they wanted to push any further. Later that day, Jair was walking through the estate when he ran into another knight on duty. The one-eyed man stopped in his tracks, clearly surprised by whatever news he'd just heard. The other knight looked a bit confused, asking Jair what exactly he was trying to get at with his warning. He laughed it off, admitting that the new kid seemed to have plenty of guts and was much tougher than he looked. Meanwhile, Vlad was sitting on a bench in the training area next to a chubby trainee named Potri Canor. His mind drifted back to the journey there, remembering the chaos and the long, cold ride through the snow. He rubbed his neck, the physical and mental toll of the last few days finally starting to weigh on him. His thoughts were interrupted when Lady Oksana appeared again, looking as elegant as ever in her green dress. Vlad immediately stood up and gave her a deep, respectful bow, thanking her for her hospitality. She just smiled gracefully, clearly enjoying the effect her presence had on the young man. He stayed in that bow until she gave him leave to rise, showing the manners Joseph had drilled into him. Afterward, Vlad headed back to his quarters, carrying his jacket and thinking about his next move. He stopped by a window and looked down into the courtyard, noticing a group of trainees gathered below. It wasn't a training session. They were surrounding someone and throwing heavy punches with malicious intent. The leader of the group was mocking the victim, asking if he was overdue for another beat. It was Potri, and the bully was mocking him for being friends with the new kid from the alleys. They didn't stop, raining down blows while Potri tried his best to shield his head from the impact. Watching from above, Vlad realized the world was the same everywhere. The strong always preyed on the weak. Later that night, he headed to Potri's room and knocked firmly on the door. Potri opened it cautiously, his voice trembling as he asked who was standing outside. His face was a complete disaster, covered in deep bruises and swelling from the encounter earlier. Vlad didn't offer any empty pity. He just pointed and told Potri to hand over what he was holding. It was a large piece of cured ham, and Vlad told him not to feel too bad about what was about to happen. Potri just blinked, completely confused as to why Vlad was taking his food after he'd already been beaten. But Vlad had other plans, heading out to the dark training field where the bullies were waiting for him. The lead bully told him to shut his mouth, thinking they had the advantage with so many people. Vlad just cracked his neck and gestured for the whole group to come at him all at once. The group of bullies didn't hesitate for a second, charging at Vlad with a roar as they tried to beat him into the dirt. Vlad watched them come, a small, cold smile on his face as he realized he was glad he'd changed into his gray orc leather gear. He didn't wait for them to reach him, meeting the first attacker with a brutal strike that sent blood flying across the courtyard. The boy let out a choked sound of pain as he realized far too late that the group was in way over their heads. Vlad was a blur of calculated violence, dodging a heavy swing and delivering a counterattack that cracked through the air like a whip. He moved through the crowd with a predator's grace, leaving the noble trainees scrambling in absolute terror. One of the larger boys tried to come at him from the side, raising his wooden sword high for a desperate, heavy blow. But Vlad's weapon moved faster than the eye could follow, cutting a massive, glowing arc through the night air. His eyes glowed with that unsettling blue light, marking him as something far more dangerous than just another alley rat. Every strike was precise and heavy, systematically taking down anyone who dared to stand in his path. He was a whirlwind of motion, hitting multiple targets before they could even register where he had moved. Sobanin, the ringleader, watched his group fall apart, his face twisting in a mix of fury and fear as he cursed at Vlad. Before he could finish his insult, Vlad's wooden sword connected squarely with his jaw, nearly taking his head off his shoulders. Vlad didn't let up for a second, leaping into the air to come down on the bully with everything he had. The impact was devastating, the sound of the wooden sword hitting home echoing loudly through the courtyard. Sobanin was sent sprawling, his pride and his body both completely shattered by the relentless assault. Vlad stood over him, holding his practice sword with a steady hand, his face completely devoid of any mercy. The once arrogant bully was reduced to a sobbing mess on the ground, his face swollen and heavily tear-streaked. Vlad tightened his grip on the hilt of his sword, making sure the lesson was well and truly learned. He delivered one final, decisive strike to another trainee who tried to crawl away, ending the conflict then and there. The courtyard was filled with the sounds of groans and sobbing as the rest of the gang lay defeated in the dirt. Finally, Vlad stood over Sobanin one last time, pinning him down with the blunt tip of his wooden sword. He looked down at the boy with those glowing blue eyes, providing a silent warning that he wouldn't be so lenient next time. As he walked away, Vlad let out a long breath, satisfied that he'd finally paid back the debt for Poetry's stolen ham. He didn't care about the consequences. He had made his point, and his expression remained as hard as stone. He walked past the remaining trainees, who could only watch him go with looks of absolute horror and disbelief. They were left shaking in his wake, knowing that the hierarchy of the estate had just been permanently altered. Later, in the main hall, Lord Joseph Bezid sat on his throne while a herald read through a list of formal reports. Joseph soon set out, walking through the corridors with Jair, his loyal veteran knight, following closely behind. They discussed the recent events, Joseph looking calm as Jair provided him with the necessary military updates. Joseph's thoughts drifted to the challenges ahead, symbolized by the fierce orcs that constantly threatened their borders. He held up a letter sealed with red wax, knowing that the time had finally come to take the next step in his plan. Soon, Joseph was traveling in a lavish carriage with Vlad, mentioning that their destination, Dirmar, was famous for its lemons. Vlad listened quietly, eventually asking if that was the reason Sir Jair was taking such direct action. Joseph leaned back, noting that the most bitter conflicts often happened between family members who shared the same blood. In his mind, he saw a portrait of a young woman with long blue hair, Alicia, the rightful heir to the Hanel family. He explained that the Hanel family's internal power struggle was coming to a head, and they were caught in the middle. Vlad took it all in, realizing that his role as Joseph's secret weapon was about to be put to a very real, dangerous test. Outside, Jair rode alongside the carriage, and Joseph noted how impressive it was for a family head to invite a knight to defend their honor. Joseph suddenly leaned out the window and barked an order, his voice cutting sharply through the sound of the horse's hooves. Suddenly, the entire carriage began to jolt and sway violently, making the trainees wonder if an earthquake was hitting. The horses whinnied in distress as the ground itself seemed to tremble, the journey to Dirmar taking a sudden, chaotic turn. Realizing the danger was immediate, Vlad swore under his breath and prepared to act. As the carriage jolted, Vlad lunged toward Lord Joseph, shouting for him to get down. Joseph remained surprisingly calm, almost amused by Vlad's intense reaction to the sudden chaos. Outside, the very earth was being torn apart as something massive moved beneath the surface. The cause of the disturbance was quickly identified as a monstrous giant deathworm, known as the remnant of the fallen dragon. The creature's sheer size left even Vlad breathless. After the incident, the carriage finally reached the estate, and life returned to its noble order. Joseph pulled Vlad aside, informing him that he was no longer confined and could move as he pleased. When Vlad hesitated, Joseph questioned if he was unhappy with his newfound freedom. Meanwhile, the training and combat within the estate grounds continued with relentless intensity. Jair gave Vlad a gruff piece of parting advice, warning him not to get beaten up in some back alleyway. The group stood together in the courtyard, the bond between master and weapon growing more complex. Vlad took the words to heart, his resolve hardening as he prepared for the next phase of service. He couldn't help but wonder about the city they were heading to, supposedly famous for its lemons. His hand rested firmly on the hilt of his sword, a silent promise to be ready for whatever came next. Looking out at the landscape, a specific tree on a distant hill triggered a deep, buried memory for Vlad. He realized that after everything he'd been through, he might finally need a place to find some peace and pray. Thoughts of Miss Alicia Hanel loomed large, a potential contract of swords and memories binding their fates. Somewhere else, Alicia clenched her hands tightly together, her own determination burning just as bright. Joseph looked toward the future, knowing everything depended on his success in the upcoming duel. He warned his attendants as they walked through the halls that Alicia was not an opponent to be taken lightly. He admitted to Jair that she had held the advantage until the very final moments of their last encounter. Joseph's eyes narrowed, his mind already calculating the next moves for the dangerous game they were playing. Memories are the only things that truly last. Vlad of Sora stands in the quiet graveyard of the Hanel family. He looks down at a weathered headstone, noticing how neglected it's become. He kneels and bows his head in a silent show of respect. Suddenly, a massive, glowing presence begins to manifest behind him. A giant spirit looms over the graveyard, its form pulsing with light. Vlad senses something and slowly opens his eyes. A brilliant blue glow sparks in his gaze as he feels a surge of power. Energy erupts from him, bathing the stone monuments in a cold, blue light. He looks up, completely caught off guard by what's appearing before him. It's the White Snake Spirit, a legendary being of the land. The massive serpent winds around a nearby tree, staring down at him with glowing eyes. Vlad reaches out, finding the spirit's energy surprisingly warm despite its appearance. "How did you come here?" A voice cuts through the air, making him jump. He turns to see a woman in simple clothes standing behind him, holding a bucket. It's Alicia Hanel, though she's dressed like a common servant right now. Vlad quickly pulls out his wooden identity plaque to show he's not a trespasser. He explains his presence, but she remains skeptical, crossing her arms. She looks at the grave he was cleaning with a curious, distant expression. "I'll consider it depending on how well you clean it," she tells him, testing his sincerity. Vlad doesn't complain and gets straight back to work, scrubbing the stone clean. He finishes the job, leaving the grave looking far better than he found it. The scene shifts to the day of the succession duel, with steel clashing in the arena. Vlad watches intently from the side, his eyes following every movement. The first match is already underway, a brutal display of strength and skill. He stays in the shadows, analyzing the techniques of the professional knights. He watches the veterans trade blows, absorbing everything he sees. His attention shifts as the crowd begins to murmur at the entrance of the high nobles. He catches a glimpse of a woman in an elegant blue dress and realizes who it is. It's the girl from the graveyard, Alicia, looking every bit the noble she truly is. The challenger, a massive knight with a thick mustache, steps into the center of the ring. The announcer recites the rules, reminding everyone that surrender ends the match immediately. With a signal, the two combatants charge, their weapons ready. Jair, Alicia's first champion, prepares to face the heavy assault. He moves with practiced grace, but his opponent is an absolute wall of muscle. The massive knight swings his heavy blade with terrifying force. Jair leaps back, barely avoiding a strike that would have crushed his arm. He tries to find an opening, but the larger man is surprisingly fast. The two knights circle each other, the tension in the arena reaching a breaking point. "You bastard!" the opponent roars, putting his full weight behind his next swing. Jair braces himself as the massive blade comes crashing down from above. He catches the blow on his own sword, the impact sending sparks flying across the arena floor. Jair keeps the pressure on, his blade a blur as he strikes at his massive opponent. The two knights dance through the arena, steel ringing out with every exchange. Their swords lock together in a shower of sparks, neither side willing to give an inch. The dust settles, and Jair stands tall while his opponent is forced to one knee. Alicia lets out a breath she didn't know she was holding as the announcer declares Jair the winner. The veteran knight doesn't celebrate, keeping his focus sharp even after his victory. Vlad watches from the sidelines, realizing just how high the ceiling for a true knight really is. Lord Joseph Bezid steps forward, surprising the boy with a firm, supportive grip. The sudden contact catches Vlad off guard, his blue eyes wide with shock. "Be careful," Joseph warns him, his gaze fixed on the next challenger. "I'm Vlad of Sora," the boy announces, stepping into the ring for his turn. Pablo of Arnstein sneers, radiating a dark, heavy pressure that fills the arena. He tells Vlad he's not even worthy of hearing his name. The massive knight laughs, claiming that the house of Bayezid has truly fallen if they're relying on a kid. Vlad doesn't waste words, launching himself forward in a high-speed strike. His gaze is fixed on his target, his resolve hardening as he closes the distance. He matches Pablo's strength with sheer speed, their blades clashing in the center of the ring. Vlad analyzes the massive man's stance, deciding to aim for the left where he's exposed. He lunges again, his movements becoming more fluid as he enters a state of total focus. He ducks low, trying to slide his blade past Pablo's guard. The knight parries the blow with practiced ease, his movements heavy and deliberate. Vlad is pushed back, the raw power of the older man threatening to overwhelm him. He grinds his teeth, fighting to keep his grip on his sword as the pressure mounts. Pablo looms over him like a mountain, his expression cold and unimpressed. The air itself seems to crack as their weapons collide once more. A heavy strike sends Vlad reeling, his defense barely holding together. They lock eyes across clashing steel, a silent battle of wills playing out between them. Something shifts deep inside Vlad, his eyes beginning to burn with a brilliant blue light. He channels that inner fire, his next strike carrying a weight it didn't have before. He lets out a roar, pouring every ounce of his spirit into the fight. He dives back into the fray, his speed reaching levels that shouldn't be possible for his age. He skids across the floor, his breathing heavy but his spirit unbroken. Pablo stands his ground, clearly surprised by the tenacity of the gutter rat. The two combatants square off again, the atmosphere in the arena thick with tension. Vlad's vision clears, a cold, predatory focus taking over as he hears voices telling him he's worked hard. He moves like a streak of lightning, his blade leaving a trail of blue light in its wake. Pablo barely manages to get his sword up in time to block the ferocious assault. Vlad pulls back for a moment, his body screaming from the exertion of his newfound power. He wonders why he's the only one struggling so hard just to prove his worth. He shakes off the thought and charges again, his sword singing as it cuts through the air. His hands are bloodied from the force of the clashes, but his grip remains unshakable. He mirrors Jair's counter technique, turning Pablo's own strength against him. Pablo's eyes widen as he realizes the boy in front of him is no ordinary squire. Vlad grits his teeth, his strength waning as Pablo continues his relentless assault. Blood drips from the hilt of his sword, a testament to the sheer force behind every clash. Despite the exhaustion, his eyes flare with a brilliant blue light, refusing to let the fire of his resolve be extinguished. A massive explosion of energy erupts between them as their blades collide in a final, desperate struggle. Vlad slides past the titan of a man, his movements a blur of instinct and raw talent. Steel screams against steel, sending a cascade of sparks illuminating the arena floor. He strikes at Pablo's heavy shield, the impact vibrating through his entire body. The massive knight roars, his pride refusing to let him buckle under the pressure of a gutter rat. Seizing a split-second opening, Vlad leaps into the air, bringing his blade down with everything he has left. His aura explodes into a magnificent blue flame, shocking everyone in the Grand Hall. Alicia watches with bated breath, while Lord Joseph and Vorden stare in disbelief at the boy's sudden awakening. Pablo's eyes widen as he realizes the sheer possibility standing before him, a talent that defies logic. "Come at me, boy," Pablo bellows, his warrior spirit ignited by the challenge. Vlad lunges forward, his sword trailing a path of blue lightning through the air. They meet in a thunderous collision, the force of their combined auras shaking the very foundation of the arena. Silence falls as the dust clears, revealing Vlad's bloodied hand resting limp on the floor. Pablo catches the boy before he can hit the ground, his expression softening into one of genuine respect. "Possibility is something beautiful," the veteran muses, looking down at the unconscious youth who pushed him to the limit. Deep within his mind, a vision of the past flickers, knights in white armor kneeling before a grand throne. A figure with a crown of gold and eyes of pure light stares back, an ancient power calling out to the boy. Vlad gasps as he jolts awake, finding himself in a soft bed, far from the cold dirt of the slums. He panics for a moment, his hands instinctively searching for his sword. "Calm down," Lord Joseph says with a gentle smile, sitting patiently by his bedside. The noble hands him a cup of water, his eyes filled with a new level of interest in the boy's future. Vlad sips the water, trying to make sense of the overwhelming power that had surged through him. Behind him, the shadow of a legendary warrior seems to loom, a sign of the path he has now begun to walk. Outside the window, Alicia stands with Count Bezid, feeling a mix of frustration and awe at the nightly display they just witnessed. Alicia and the Count walk away, their minds already turning to the political ripples this boy will cause. Soon after, Vlad is back on his feet and out in the sun, attempting to learn the basics of horsemanship. However, this starving wolf aura seems to terrify the beast, and he finds himself face-planting in the dirt once again. "You're doing it wrong," Vorden scoffs, crossing his arms as he watches the boy struggle. He doesn't go easy on him, delivering a sharp blow to keep Vlad on his toes during their training session. Vlad groans, wiping the sweat from his brow as he wonders why riding a horse is harder than fighting a giant. Their training is interrupted as Vlad notices a figure approaching from the distance. A man with lavender hair and a smug mustache walks toward them, his presence oozing with arrogance. Vorden doesn't hesitate, immediately leveling his sword at the newcomer with a look of pure disdain. The man, Ubayer, lets out a sinister laugh, his own purple aura manifesting in response to Vorden's hostility. Before Ubayer can finish his mockery, Vorden lunges forward, a heavy blow catching the traitor off guard. Ubayer's smug expression vanishes as he's sent reeling, stunned that anyone would dare strike a man of his standing. Vorden doesn't stop there, following up with a brutal strike that sends the noble flying across the courtyard. Ubayer crashes into the ground, the force of the attack leaving him gasping for air. He slowly picks himself up, wiping blood from his lip as a dark, vengeful light glints in his eyes. Vorden follows through with a heavy blow, his fist connecting squarely with Yubeir's face as the traitor reels back. The force of the strike sends the purple-haired knight to his knees, his pride shattered as easily as his defenses. Yubeir can only clutch his chest in agony, unable to meet the cold, judgmental gaze of the man who served the Empire with actual honor. As the defeated knight slinks away, Vorden turns back to Vlad, his expression softening slightly as he considers the boy's potential. In a quiet moment of reflection, Vlad stands before the ancient tree in the Hanel family graveyard, the morning sun casting long shadows across the stones. He sinks to one knee, driving his sword into the earth as a sign of respect for the traces left behind by those who came before him. Suddenly, his eyes flare with that familiar, otherworldly blue light, sensing a presence that transcends the physical realm. From amidst of the graveyard, a massive white snake head emerges, its glowing blue eyes fixed intently on the young swordsman. The spirit of the white snake coils around him, its scales shimmering like moonlight as it recognizes the forgotten enigma within the boy. It lets out a silent, soul-piercing cry, acknowledging the rare spark of destiny that has awakened in the slums of Sora. Bathing the entire graveyard in a celestial glow, the spirit bestows its blessing upon Vlad, a power he doesn't yet understand. Vlad stands amidst the swirling energy, his soul resonating with the ancient spirit as the spirit's blessing takes hold. The scene shifts back to the present, where the nobility and knights of House Bezid gather in the courtyard to mark the end of the succession duel. Vlad kneels respectfully before Alicia Hanel and the Count, his heart heavy with the weight of the honor he has just defended. Alicia reaches into her sleeve and produces a fine purple handkerchief, its golden borders catching the light of the midday sun. Standing with regal poise, she gazes down at her savior, her expression a mix of gratitude and something more profound. To Vlad's confusion, she holds the token out to him, a gesture that carries a heavy meaning in the world of highborn knights. He hesitantly takes the soft cloth, his rough, calloused hands a stark contrast to the delicate silk. Alicia gently clasps his hands with her own, her eyes shimmering with a warmth that catches the young warrior completely off guard. In the background, Count Bezid and Lord Joseph watch with amused smirks, while Vorden looks on with a raised eyebrow at the budding romantic tension. What's wrong with all of them? Vlad wonders, staring at the purple cloth as if it were a strange, unidentifiable monster. Vorden quickly steps in to snap him out of it, barking a command for Vlad to keep his eyes on his duty rather than the lady's charms. Well, congratulations anyhow, Lord Joseph adds with a chuckle, amused by the boy's utter lack of social awareness. As the title of Honorary Knight is officially bestowed upon him, Vlad's eyes glow with a renewed intensity, ready to face whatever new trials this path brings. Vlad can't believe his ears. An honorary knight? Inside the carriage, Lord Joseph Bezid explains that this title is the only way to protect Alicia's honor after that duel. He pulls out a pouch, already calculating the next move in his political game. Joseph leans in, telling Vlad that he'll have to carry the weight of this responsibility himself. Vlad stares at the pouch, starting to realize just how messy high society politics can get. Joseph pulls out a document, a fake debt note he used to totally screw over his rivals. But suddenly, Vlad senses a shift in the air outside. A massive cloud of dust kicks up from the horizon, coming their way fast. It's a whole herd of horses, and they look like they're running for their lives. They're stampeding right toward the carriage in total terror. Vlad panics, wondering why these animals are losing their minds just by being near him. He grips the carriage edge as the ground shakes beneath the stampede. Joseph just watches him with that same smug look, knowing exactly what's happened. Even the escorts are staying back, clearly wary of the aura Vlad is leaking. A knight kneels before a bloodied sack, presenting the grim result of their recent dispute. Joseph makes it clear, the world of nobles isn't about being nice. It's a cold, unforgiving place where power is the only currency. And often, that power is enforced with brutal, bloody efficiency. He shows off a severed head as a reminder of what happens to those who get in their way. Back at the capital, Count Bezid goes over the reports with his top advisor. They're realizing this gutter rat might be the wild card they need for the upcoming succession war. The Count thinks back to the legends of the first swordmasters who fought their way up from nothing. Meanwhile, Vlad is back at the academy, and Jair isn't giving him a second to breathe. The trainer yells at him to focus. Raw power is useless without a solid foundation. Vlad lunges forward, but Jair effortlessly shuts him down. His eyes glow with a desperate light as he tries to find an opening. Jair swings back hard, showing him that his shining aura won't save him from a real expert. The session ends with Vlad on the ground, gasping for air while his lungs burn. Jair stands over him, scolding him for trying to force his power instead of mastering the basics. Vlad bows his head, accepting the harsh truth that he's still just a beginner. That night, He heads out to the woods to practice his swings until his arms go numb. He grips the sword tight, trying to replicate that flow he felt in the duel. He pours everything into one sharp motion, his blue eyes cutting through the dark. A massive shockwave of aura tears a trench right through the forest floor. He's completely drained, but he knows he can't stop yet if he wants to survive. From the castle ramparts, Jair watches the kid's progress with a silent, calculating gaze. In a completely different corner of the kingdom, the county of Ravnoma is being wiped off the map. Corpses of knights are scattered throughout the burning remains of the castle. A lone man walks through the carnage like he's just taking a stroll. He steps over the fallen, his bloody sword trailing behind him on the cold stone. It's Godwin, looking completely bored as he stands in the middle of a literal bloodbath. He turns away from the ruin he's created, his work here finally done. One last knight falls, gasping for breath as he realizes it's all over. Godwin stands over him, his blade dripping with the blood of an entire house. He doesn't feel a thing, his eyes cold and empty as he surveys the slaughter. Blood splatters against the glass, a grim end to a once proud lineage. Far away from the carnage, Vlad stands before Lord Joseph, who's taking it easy in his man. Joseph tells him he doesn't need to worry about being a commoner anymore. He's an honorary knight now. He sends Vlad off with a reminder that his new life comes with certain expectations. Vlad wanders the halls, feeling like a complete fraud in his expensive new cloak. He meets Lady Oksana Bayezid, who greets him with a level of kindness he's not used to. She adjusts his cloak, telling him he should be careful not to ruin the Bayezid name. Vlad stares out the window, the weight of his past still heavy on his shoulders. He remembers a red-haired girl he once knew, her eyes full of the same loneliness he feels. She was just another girl at the convent, scrubbing the floors until her hands bled. She paused for a moment, looking down as if she knew her life would never change. The other girls would gossip and giggle, completely ignoring her quiet misery. She tried to convince herself things would get better, but her smile never reached her eyes. Suddenly, a woman bursts in, screaming at the girls to hide before it's too late. Chaos erupts as they're herded into the shadows while soldiers kick down the doors. A hand reaches out from the darkness, desperate for someone to save, but there's no mercy here. One of the men grabs the woman by her hair and yanks her back. The red-haired girl can only watch in absolute terror as her world is ripped apart. The soldiers laugh as they drag her away, leaving nothing but screams behind. Back in the present, an old servant offers Vlad some advice on how to carry himself. Vlad steps outside, the sunlight doing little to warm the cold feeling in his chest. The horses in the paddock go wide-eyed the second they catch his scent. They bolt in a blind panic, sensing the predator hidden beneath the fine clothes. Inside the warm estate, Potri Canor relaxes, completely unaware of the tension brewing outside. He looks toward the door, wondering what all the commotion is about. Vlad tries to calm his aura, but the starving wolf isn't so easily tamed. He joins the other squires, who all stare at him like he's some kind of freak. They eventually set out on their trip, a line of horses and carts winding through the plains. Vlad sits in the back of a wagon, accompanied by Dorothea, a beastman mage. A knight points toward the horizon, signaling that they're almost at their destination. Priest Andreas leads a group of weary pilgrims right behind the main escort. A lone black horse watches them from a nearby hill, its eyes following their every move. Suddenly, the cart hits a massive rock, nearly tossing Vlad out of his seat. He flails around, trying to regain his balance as the wagon wobbles dangerously. A squire quickly reaches out to help him, looking half amused and half terrified. Vlad just catches his breath, feeling more out of his element with every passing line. But his attention is quickly drawn to a massive cloud of dust rising in the distance. It's another stampede, and it's heading straight for the pilgrims and their escort. Vlad's blue eyes widen in shock. He's never seen animals act this aggressively before. A lone black horse gallops frantically, its eyes wide with a fear that goes beyond simple instinct. Behind it, a massive cloud of dust rises, signaling the approach of something truly monstrous. Vlad's eyes glow with a piercing blue light as he realizes this is no ordinary stampede. On a nearby ridge, a knight watches in silence as the chaos unfolds below him. The entire herd is in a blind panic, charging across the plains as if the devil himself were at their heels. Suddenly, the ground erupts with a deafening roar, sending dirt and rock flying everywhere. A massive, segmented creature bursts from the earth, its maw filled with rows of razor-sharp teeth. It's a death worm. It strikes with terrifying speed, its colossal form easily crushing a horse in its path. Dorothea screams in horror, her eyes wide as she witnesses the sheer brutality of the attack. The death worm looms over the battlefield, a remnant of a fallen dragon that knows only hunger. Horses scatter in every direction, but there's nowhere to hide from the predator beneath the ground. Blood splatters the grass as the creature continues its rampage, completely ignoring the humans for now. Priest Andreas and the pilgrims flee for their lives, their prayers lost in the sounds of slaughter. A knight on horseback watches the carnage with a grim expression, realizing they are completely outmatched. He shouts orders to the others, his voice barely audible over the roar of the beast. The escorts draw their weapons, though they know their steel will likely do little against such a monster. One knight charges forward, his red cloak billowing as he tries to draw the creature's attention. The deathworm turns its massive head, sensing a new challenger in the midst of its meal. A dark, ghostly aura begins to swirl around the creature, amplifying its terrifying presence. Vlad narrows his eyes, his focus narrowing down to the beast in front of him. Dorothea frantically searches through her collection of magic crystals, desperate for anything that might help. Priest Andreas calls upon the light, his staff glowing as he tries to provide whatever protection he can. A massive pillar of fire erupts from the ground, momentarily blinding everyone nearby. Vlad and another squire can only watch in shock as the battle intensifies. The knight with the flaming sword strikes at the creature, his eye glowing with an intense fire. The deathworm shrieks in pain as the magical blade bites into its thick hide. It lurches forward, its mouth opening wide as it prepares to swallow the annoying human whole. The ground shakes with every movement of the beast, making it nearly impossible to stand. The knights struggle to keep their horses under control while avoiding the creature's thrashing tail. One of the squires shouts a warning, pointing toward another eruption of dust nearby. Another massive tremor rocks the area, sending everyone stumbling. A knight is nearly thrown from his saddle as his horse rears up in a blind pant. Dorothea holds up a scrap of paper, her expression fierce despite her fear. Vlad reaches out, his hand steady as he prepares to make his move. He grabs a small pouch, its contents vital for what he's about to do. With a determined look, he drops down from the wagon and onto the chaotic battlefield. He leaps into the air, his cloak flapping behind him like a dark wind. He slides down a steep embankment, his eyes never leaving the monster. He lands gracefully, already moving toward the fray with surprising speed. He slides through the dirt, his boots kicking up dust as he tries to find an opening. He nearly loses his footing as the ground shifts once again. Whoa! He barely recovers, his heart pounding against his ribs as he faces the nightmare head-on. Vlad and his companions are sent tumbling across the rough terrain as the ground buckles beneath them. The force of the tremor is overwhelming, throwing Vlad onto his back with a heavy thud. He lies there for a moment, the world spinning around him as dust settles on the grass. Panting heavily, Vlad struggles to catch his breath, his heart hammering against his ribs in a frantic rhythm. A strange, ethereal light begins to emanate from him, bathing the small crater in a soft blue glow. His blue eyes ignite with an otherworldly intensity, reflecting a vast, starry cosmos within their depths. A voice echoes in his mind, reminding him of the narrow margin between life and death. Without the snake's blessing, you really would have died. Drawing strength from an unknown source, he plants his feet and forces himself to stand. Memories of his path and the guidance he received from Priest Andreas flash through his mind, anchoring his resolve. He turns his gaze back toward the chaos, his fear replaced by a cold, sharp focus. They're far, he mutters, gauging the distance between himself and the beleaguered pilgrims. He pulls out several marking spells, the paper crackling with dormant energy. Then the marking spell. In the distance, another massive eruption of Earth signals the deathworm's relentless pursuit. With a flick of his wrist, Vlad sends the paper charms flying into the air where they catch the wind. He draws his sword in one fluid motion, the blade singing as it catches the blue light. Ancient runes flare to life along the length of the steel, pulsing with a power that feels both alien and familiar. Vlad lets out a low growl, his concentration absolute as he prepares to unleash the sword's true potential. The light intensifies, turning the sword into a pillar of radiant blue energy. He slams the blade into the earth, sending a ripple of magical force outward that freezes the air around him. Gritting his teeth, he narrows his vision, shutting out the world to focus on the connection within. For a heartbeat, he is elsewhere, a silent, starlit realm where the weight of his destiny feels tangible. The deathworm lunges, its many-toothed maw wide enough to swallow a horse whole. A sinister purple energy coils around the beast's throat, a sign of the dark corruption driving its hunger. But Vlad is ready, his sword wreathed in blue flames as he prepares to meet the monster's charge. The monster lets out a deafening roar, its massive, toothy maw wide open. Vlad leaps back just in time, shouting as the ground beneath him shatters. The deathworm looms over him like a mountain of scales and hunger. It lunges forward, determined to crush the tiny human in its path. The impact sends debris flying everywhere, burying the spot where he just stood. Vlad stands his ground, energy rippling through the air around him. He's thrown back by a sudden blast, barely keeping his footing. Tiger screams out in panic, thinking the kid is done for. But out of the dust, Vlad charges forward on the back of a black spirit horse. Tiger watches in disbelief as the boy and the beast lock eyes for a split second. Vlad isn't running away. He's riding straight toward the nightmare. He's actually hyped, yelling about finally being on a horse. Suddenly, a blue aura erupts from both the rider and his mount. Vlad grips his blade, the light of the spirit horse reflecting off the steel. Tiger calls out to him, but the kid is already moving too fast to hear. They gallop across the field, a knight and a gutter rat chasing the same target. To Tiger, it looks like pure madness, suicide without a hint of hesitation. But Vlad's face is cold, his focus entirely on the monster ahead. The knight can't help but admire the sheer guts it takes to make a move like that. Then something shifts, catching Tiger completely off guard. Vlad's eyes are locked in, his blade glowing with a strange, new intensity. Neither of them blinks, the air between them thick with the weight of the moment. The worm screeches, sensing the threat coming its way. Vlad leans low against the horse's neck, moving as one with the animal. Ghostly figures of horses appear in his wake, trailing blue flames. He draws his sword, preparing for the final clash. The monster prepares to snap him out of the air. The ground literally peels away as they hit top speed. It's a head-on collision course, and Vlad isn't the one who looks scared. He remembers the lesson. Stop fighting the sword and let his existence flow through it. They dive into the chaos, horse and rider becoming a blur of motion. The blue light explodes, blinding everything in the immediate area. A massive shockwave tears through the field as they connect. Vlad pulls off a sharp turn, leaving the beast reeling behind him. Seeing his opening, Tiger ignites his own power, flames surrounding his form. Vlad watches from side, his eyes still glowing with that ethereal blue light. He continues his run, keeping the worm's attention fixed on him. The massive head swings around, snapping at his heels. Someone yells at him to get back, but he's already in the danger zone. He holds on tight, trusting the spirit horse to find the path. They charge through a pillar of blue energy, cutting a path through the dark. With one final burst of speed, Vlad and the horse become a streak of light across the battlefield. The death worm screeches in agony as the inferno consumes it. Vlad stays focused on the black horse, riding through the smoke and ash. He gallops away from the core of the blast as the creature is incinerated. The spirit horse glows with a powerful blue light, carrying Vlad across the scorched earth. Tiger and his knights keep their distance, watching the boy's incredible feat. Vlad looks back at the destruction, his job finally done. The monster makes one last desperate move before the fire finishes it off. Tiger gives the signal, and his team coordinates their positions. Stepping into the center of the blaze, Tiger prepares his ultimate strike. He unleashes his true world, a swirling vortex of flames that lights up the sky. With a single word, he commands the darkness to be gone. A pillar of pure fire erupts, completely erasing the worm from existence. The aftermath is a smoking crater where the monster once stood. Vlad stands tall beside the spirit horse, the blue aura slowly fading from his body. Tiger approaches with a weary smile, welcoming him back and praising his bravery. Exhaustion finally hits, and Tiger collapses onto the grass. He jokingly asks the kid if he's going to help him up after all that. Vlad just stares at him, seemingly unimpressed by the knight's sudden lack of dignity. Tiger calls out to the kid, but someone else is approaching. Priest Andreas leads the group of pilgrims toward their savior. Vlad shows his respect, bowing slightly to the elderly priest. The priest is overwhelmed, claiming he recognized the divine light in Vlad's actions. He reaches out as if touching something sacred, his eyes full of wonder. He officially addresses him as Vlad of Sora, the boy who saved them all. He offers a blessing, asking for compassion to follow this shining boy. Behind him, all the pilgrims kneel in prayer, showing their immense gratitude. Away from the field, Count Bezid stands in his study, contemplating the news. That night, the group gathers around campfires, the tension of the battle finally gone. Vlad sits alone, meticulously cleaning his blade in the firelight. He studies the metal, his mind likely wandering back to the slums. He remembers Marcella, a girl whose face was once stained with tears of hardship. One of the knights sits with him, trying to start a conversation over a drink. Vlad recalls the moment he first rode the spirit horse into the chaos. Tiger eventually tells him to get some rest, as they have a long journey ahead. Vlad stays up a little longer, watching the embers die out. By morning, the caravan is already on the move, heading back toward the city. A herd of wild horses runs alongside the carriage, a beautiful sight in the open fields. Vlad watches them from the window, feeling a strange connection to the animals. The spirit horse stops on a ridge, watching its rider leave for the last time. Vlad waves a quiet goodbye to the creature that helped him survive. Priest Andreas notices his melancholy and tells him not to be too sad about partings. Back at the manor, Count Bezid watches the rain, his plans for the boy already in motion. Count Bezid stands at the window of his estate, watching the relentless rain fall over the city as he ponders the future. Beneath the window, a group of attendants in white robes slowly carry a massive stone container through the downpour, overseen by priest Andreas. Inside the manor, Vlad of Sora stands in a dimly lit hallway, clenching his fist as he worries about Lord Joseph Bezid's reaction to the recent events. In his private study, Lord Joseph sits at his desk, surrounded by stacks of papers, noting that Vlad has returned a day earlier than expected. Vlad assures his lord that he is fine, but Joseph advises him to take proper care of himself despite his strength. Joseph looks at the boy with a piercing, analytical gaze, his mind clearly working through several possibilities. He murmurs the name, Sura, his voice low and thoughtful as he studies the protagonist. Joseph asks if it's true that Vlad can't even send letters, highlighting the boy's isolation. A memory flickers through Joseph's mind of a sorrowful, red-haired woman, a vision that seems to haunt his current thoughts. Joseph stands and walks past Vlad, his movements elegant but deliberate. The tension between them is palpable as their eyes meet for a brief, silent moment of mutual assessment. Images of the people Vlad saved flash by: a grateful commoner, the mysterious red-haired woman, and the elderly priest Andreas, all linked by a verified token. The vision continues, showing a highborn lady holding a handkerchief as if in mourning, further complicating the web of influence around Vlad. Back in reality, Lord Joseph stands over the kneeling Vlad, exercising his authority as the boy's master. Vlad grits his teeth, tears of frustration and determination streaming down his face as he endures the weight of his station. Somewhere else, in a grand throne room, a high-ranking priest or official bows before a figure seated on a high throne. At the base of the dais, attendants drape a white cloth over a long, narrow box, signaling a solemn ceremony. A towering, dark silhouette stands guard with a massive sword, the legendary Iron Duke, Timur Baranov. Returning to the manor, Count Bezid and an advisor watch from the window as a noble carriage departs into the mist. In the depths of the city's slums, a hooded figure walks through the shadows of a grimy, derelict alleyway. He arrives at a rowdy tavern where the air is thick with the shouts of men, demanding the company of the women inside. Inside the establishment, a beautiful woman named Marcella sits at her vanity, her face a mask of sorrow as someone calls her name. A cruel madam with an elaborate hairstyle and a long pipe looms over her, reminding Marcella of the debt she must work off. The madam grips Marcella's chin, forcing her to prepare for the night's guests, despite her obvious distress. The old woman looks at Marcella with pure contempt, whispering that she is a vile little thing before turning away. Outside the room, the crowd of ruffians erupts into cheers as they realize the tavern star attraction is finally coming out. Marcella steps onto the stage, the light from the tavern's lanterns illuminating her as she faces the sea of leering men. The madam smirks from the sidelines, enjoying the spectacle and the profit it will bring her. The men at the bar cough and lean forward, their eyes fixed on the stage with a mix of hunger and malice. Suddenly, a voice from the crowd calls out in Mr. as everyone notices a new, imposing presence entering the room. Vlad, hidden under a dark cloak, steps into the tavern, his presence instantly cooling the heated atmosphere. He raises a gloved hand to stop the proceedings, catching the attention of both the madam and the thugs. Marcella covers her mouth in shock, her eyes filling with tears as she recognizes the person who has come for her. Vlad lowers his hood, standing tall in his brown cloak as the golden light catches his hair, a stark contrast to the filth of the tavern. He walks straight to the bar where Marcella is standing, ignoring the hostile stares of the patrons. Marcella can only stare in disbelief, her eyes wide as she tries to reconcile the boy she knew with the warrior before her. Panicked, she whispers for him to get out quickly, knowing the danger he's in by interfering here. The madam crosses her arms and glares at the intruder, her expression darkening as she prepares to deal with him. Vlad stands his ground, his back to the room, as he calmly states that there's a calculation that needs to be done. One of the tavern's enforcers draws his sword, his face twisted in a sneer as he prepares to strike the arrogant stranger. Before the thug can react, Vlad is already in motion, his blade a flash of silver as he cuts through the attackers. With his eyes glowing a cold, electric blue, Vlad delivers a lethal strike to the lead thug, sending a spray of blood across the floor. Vlad stands over the first fallen thug, his movements so fast it left the crowd stunned as the man's body hits the floor with a heavy thud. Drip by drip, fresh blood falls from the edge of Vlad's blade, a grim testament to the speed and precision of his initial strike. With his face half hidden by his hood, Vlad fixes a terrifying gaze on the tavern's madam, his voice low and commanding as he tells her to shut up and stay put. Despite the display of skill, the remaining thugs are driven by greed, convinced that their boss will reward them with piles of gold for Vlad's head. Suddenly, a strange, overwhelming pressure fills the room as Vlad's eyes ignite with a piercing blue light, his presence becoming that of a true predator. Behind the boy, the spectral image of a massive, bloodthirsty wolf manifests, reflecting the raw, lethal intent that now radiates from his soul. Vlad moves like a blur of shadow and steel, drawing a longer blade as he launches himself into the middle of the circling pack of ruffians. The tavern air is filled with the sound of steel meeting flesh as Vlad cuts through the first line of attackers with practiced ease. Another thug falls, unable to even raise his weapon before Vlad's sword finds its mark, the sheer speed of the protagonist leaving them no room to react. From above, the scene is one of absolute carnage as Vlad becomes a whirlwind of death, blood spraying in all directions as he carves a path through the gang. He doesn't waste a single movement, delivering a lethal, lightning-fast strike to the throat of one of the larger enforcers. The tavern thugs can only gasp in shock and pain, their eyes widening in their final moments as they realize they are facing a monster in human form. Deep within the hideout, the gang's leader, One-Armed Jack, remains oblivious to the slaughter, drinking deeply from a bottle as he wallows in his own arrogance. Sitting atop a literal mountain of skulls, the grizzled veteran raises his hook hand, a man who has built his life on the belief that the strong must take from the weak. With a scarred and weary face, Jack muses to himself about the harsh reality of the world, a truth he only fully grasped after rising to the top of the slum's hierarchy. Back in the main hall, Vlad walks through the field of corpses, his silhouette framed by a cold, moonlight-like glow as he reflects on the insignificance of his enemies' lives. The heavy silence of the boss's chambers is shattered as a terrified thug bursts through the door, screaming for One-Armed Jack. Jack looks up from his drink, his expression one of pure annoyance as he demands to know what could possibly be worth such an intrusion. Stuttering with fear, the messenger reports that the rumors are true. The gang's escape routes are being cut off by armed men at every exit. Outside, the show era security guards have mobilized in force, their shields and spears forming an unbreakable wall as they surround the tavern. Panic spreads through the remaining gang members, who desperately claim they've already paid their bribes, unaware that their protection has just expired. In the center of the tavern, Vlad stands motionless amidst the pile of men he has slain, his cloak and blade stained with the blood of the corrupt. One blue eye burns through the darkness of his hood, a silent, deadly promise that for One-Armed Jack and his men, the night is just beginning. Under the flickering torchlight, the city guards stand in formation as the operation begins. Vordan looks on, noting that their target has already made his move. A lone figure steps into the misty darkness of the alleyway, heading straight for the slums. Vordan warns Vlad that he's walking into a nest of over 50 men. Vlad doesn't seem bothered by the numbers and tells Vordan to get the cleanup ready. With a sharp drawing of steel, the massacre officially kicks off. Vlad stands silently, his presence weighing heavy on the room. The thugs ask if he's really doing this today, and Vlad gives them their answer with a blade. He thinks back to One-Armed Jack, the man who started all this by threatening his mentor. The cold blue aura of his power begins to surge as he grips his sword. He lunges forward, his eyes glowing with a terrifying intensity. He's a blur of motion, tearing through the first wave before they can even scream. His sword cuts through flesh and bone as if they were nothing. Thugs drop to the floor, clutching their wounds as the hallway turns into a slaughterhouse. Vlad stands over the fallen, blood dripping from his cape as he continues his march. He steps through the wreckage, focused only on moving forward. He tells the remaining men that he's just here to settle an old score. A dozen blades swing at him at once, but none of them can touch him. A thug screams out a desperate attack from behind. Vlad barely moves, but the resulting spray of blood tells the whole story. He stands in the center of the room, completely unbothered by the growing pile of bodies. Another man falls, howling in pain as Vlad carves a path through the gang. He clears the space around him with a single, sweeping aura strike. The thugs try to throw a heavy net over him to slow him down. Vlad ducks underneath their trap, moving with predatory grace. The survivors are paralyzed by fear, unable to keep up with his speed. He charges up the stairs, leaving the confusion behind him. He reaches the upper level and looks down at the remaining guards. He severs a support rope, using the falling machinery to create a distraction. Vlad grabs onto a rope and swings down, diving back into the fray. He drops into their midst like a fallen star, catching everyone off guard. He uses the momentum to launch himself even further into the enemy lines. He sticks the landing, immediately resetting his stance for the next fight. The thugs regroup with another net, hoping this time it'll catch him. He easily vaults over their trap, making their best efforts look like child's play. Finally, he finds himself standing across from one-armed Jack. A strike connects, sending blood splashing across Jack's face as the boss reels back. The old leader collapses, the life draining out of him as he hits the floor. Vlad senses more movement, and his eyes flare blue, searching for the next target. He deflects a blade from an opportunistic thug who thought he was distracted. An arrow whistles past his head, narrowly missing its mark as Vlad dodges at the last second. Up on the balcony, the archers curse their luck as the gutter rat proves impossible to pin down. Arrows whiz through the air, but they're far too slow to catch a ghost from the gutters. Vlad drops through the center of the warehouse, falling like a lead weight through the shadows. His bloodied hand slams onto a support beam, stopping his descent with a violent jolt. He kicks off the wall, effortlessly twisting through the air as more arrows fly wide. His eyes flare with a cold, predatory light as he spots his next targets. He lands a spray of crimson, his blade carving through 3 men before they can even scream. Vlad pauses for a heartbeat to wipe the blood from his lips, his expression unreadable. He stares down the next hallway, where a handful of thugs wait with trembling blades. Outside in the harbor, the moon reflects off the water in a rare moment of peace for Sora. Across town, Harvin is hunched over his ledgers, sensing a storm brewing in the back alleys. An associate bursts into the room, gasping out news of the chaos unfolding at the docks. The messenger asks if Harvin is still connected to that one guy, Vlad. Harvin's eyes go wide as the realization hits him. His friend has finally come home. The worry etched on his face is clear as he processes the scale of the massacre. Grabbing his cane, Harvin limps out into the night, desperate to find his friend before it's too late. Back at the hideout, Vlad is completely lost to the battle, his aura flaring bright blue. He swings his sword with enough force to shatter the stone floor, ending another life. A desperate thug lunges forward, screaming a death cry that no one will hear. Vlad meets the charge with a heavy kick, snapping ribs and sending the man tumbling. A wide arc of steel clears the path ahead, the air thick with the scent of copper. He stands over the carnage, his mind fixed on a single name, One-Armed Jack. He charges through the next group of guards, a blur of motion that they can't hope to parry. The blood on his face only adds to the terrifying image of the knight who rose from the mud. He leaps into the air, his blade catching the light as he descends on the final defense. He drives his sword through a fallen enemy, ensuring that no one is left standing behind him. He mocks the dying man, telling him he should have worried more about his teeth than his pride. The thug lets out a final, pained groan as the life leaves his eyes. Vlad casually wipes his blade, noting that the guy doesn't really need those teeth anymore anyway. He stands alone in a hallway of corpses, the only sound being the slow drip of blood. He reaches the final room and finds One-Armed Jack sitting at the bar, waiting for him. Jack turns around with a grin that says he's been expecting this day for a long time. Vlad doesn't waste words, launching himself at the man who betrayed his home. Their swords collide with a deafening crack, the force of the blow rattling the whole room. They lock blades, each pushing with everything they've got as they stare each other down. Jack's hand trembles as he tries to overpower the young boy he once looked down on. He swings his hook in a dirty arc, but Vlad is already moving out of the way. Vlad leaps back and delivers a powerful overhead strike. Jack manages to pivot, his eyes wide as he realizes the sheer gap in their power. Steel clatters against steel as they trade blows in a high-stakes duel. Jack tries to trap Vlad's sword with his hook, reaching for a desperate advantage. The exchange is a blur of sparks and blood, neither man willing to back down. Vlad lands a heavy blow, sending Jack reeling as he lets out a pained roar. One-Armed Jack brings his blade down, the full weight of his greed behind the blow. Vlad grits his teeth, his face a mask of cold determination as blood sprays across his cheeks. Their swords clash in a blinding explosion of light, the force of their meeting shaking the air. Vlad reaches out to grab what shines, his fingers tightening around the hilt of his destiny. In one fluid motion, he lunges forward, his blade finding its mark in Jack's chest. His blue eyes flare with an inhuman intensity as the power of his world begins to consume his enemy. The gutter rat delivers a killing blow, a horizontal arc of steel that sends Jack flying backward. Blood spurts from Jack's arm as his hook hand is sent spinning across the floor. Vlad stands amidst the silence, his sword dripping with the blood of the man who once ruled his world. He follows through with a massive, final swing that slices through the very air. His gaze remains fixed and unwavering, a predator that has finally caught its prey. One-Armed Jack is torn apart by the sheer force of the blow, a shadow fading into the dark. The veteran street fighter stares in disbelief, his eyes wide as his lifeblood drains away. The sound of his final breath is lost in the quiet of the warehouse as he collapses to the floor. It's over. The reign of One-Armed Jack has come to a bloody and final conclusion. Vlad looks down at his hands, the adrenaline of the kill still surging through his veins. His face is spattered with gore, his expression reflecting the heavy price of his revenge. Jack lets out a final, pain groan before his body finally goes still. The young knight stands alone in the center of the carnage, the only living soul left in the room. He looks at the shattered remnants of his past, the blood pooling around the fallen boss. The light leaves Jack's eyes, leaving only the cold reality of the gutter behind. Jack's body falls into the shadows, a forgotten king of a forgotten slum. From above, the scene is one of pure devastation, a testament to Vlad's terrifying strength. Leaving the darkness behind, the proxy walks toward the light of a new dawn. Vlad emerges from the hideout, his appearance making even the veteran soldiers flinch. Count Bezid stands before a line of guards, waiting to receive the hero of the day. Harvin, a loyal friend with a neat crop of dark brown hair, rushes forward to pull the exhausted Vlad into a tight embrace. Vlad leans into his friend, whispering that it finally feels like he's truly come home. The sun rises over the city, casting a golden glow on the towers of the cathedral. Within the walls, the Sisters of the Order notice a familiar figure approaching the gate. Vlad walks through the main entrance, his heavy cloak trailing behind him on the grass. The headmistress herself escorts him, much to the surprise and awe of the younger nuns. Near the washing tubs, a red-haired nun named Zemina is busy with her chores, grumbling about her workload. She sighs with relief, hoping the morning service will go smoothly today. Vlad turns his head, his gaze softening as he spots a face from his childhood. A bright light fills the hallway as the door to the courtyard swings open. The young man walks with a purpose, his heavy boots echoing against the stone floor. Zemina stops mid-sentence, her red eyes widening as she recognizes the person standing before her. Without a word, Vlad kneels down and takes hold of the hem of her habit, a gesture of profound respect. Her breath catches in her throat as she stares at the boy who returned as a knight. Tears begin to stream down her face, a mix of overwhelming shock and pure joy. In the quiet of the cathedral, the two friends are reunited at last, the weight of their past finally lifting. For the girl who had no home, the sight of a familiar face is more than her heart can handle. Zemina collapses into Vlad's embrace, her sobs muffled against his heavy, traveling cloak. In the quiet of the carriage, they sit together, two survivors of slums, now worlds apart from where they started. "You've changed so much," Zemina cries out, clutching her meager belongings tightly to her chest. When Vlad asks why she's still crying, she can only shout back that he took far too long to come for her. The carriage rumbles along the dirt road, leaving the weight of Sora behind as they head toward a new future. Later that night, Vlad arrives at a humble workshop on the outskirts of the city. The old man welcomes him inside, gesturing for him to take a seat in the warmth of the forge. With a respectful nod, Vlad hands over his worn blade, knowing it needs the hands of a master to be made whole again. The blacksmith takes the sword, his experienced eyes immediately identifying every notch and scratch. The steel is thrust into the white-hot coals, the metal glowing as it prepares to be reborn. With powerful, rhythmic strikes, the master smith begins to rework the blade, sparks flying with every blow. The conversation shifts to a woman named Anna, someone who has fallen into the hands of the wrong people. She was a beauty of the back alleys, now caught in a web of danger that only Vlad can untangle. Down at the docks, Otar briefs Vlad on the situation, his expression grim as he describes their target. After finalizing the plan, Otar heads off to his position, leaving Vlad to face the entrance alone. The search for Anna leads them to a butcher shop that smells of iron and rot, a front for the illicit activities happening within. From the shadows, a monstrous figure emerges, a butcher whose eyes glow with a terrifying, unnatural light. Without a word, the man slams his heavy cleaver into a slab of meat, the sound echoing like a death knell. He turns his murderous gaze toward the intruder, his massive frame blocking the only way forward. But Vlad is already moving, a silver flash of steel meeting the butcher's brutal strength head-on. The butcher swings wildly, his cleaver carving through the air as Vlad dances around his lumbering attacks. The young knight wears a confident smirk, completely unbothered by the giant's display of force. As his eyes flare with a brilliant blue light, Vlad prepares to bring the day's business to a swift and violent end.